Story 1. My wife started crying and begging me to take her to the hospital after her ex had a serious accident. "Please," she sobbed. "I need to be there. I still love him." I remained silent. I took her. I watched her run toward him without looking back. That night, I packed my bags. She came home to an empty apartment and a note that said, "Don't worry. He can be with you now." And now she's bombarding my phone. I wasn't serious. Please come back. Me, a 34-year-old man, met Sarah, a 31-year-old woman, at a friend's birthday party 5 years ago. She was standing alone near the appetizer table looking a bit uncomfortable, as is often the case when you don't know many people at a gathering. I offered her a beer and a terrible joke about the suspiciously looking sauce, and the way she laughed made something in my chest tremble. We talked for hours that night, and I managed to get her number before leaving. Our relationship progressed quickly after that. We had amazing chemistry. We finished each other's sentences, shared the same obscure interests, all the usual cliches. At 3 months, we were practically living together. And at 6 months, we made it official and rented a place. I should mention that Sarah had been single for about a year when we met after breaking up with her college sweetheart, Marcus, whom she had dated for nearly 7 years. "It was simply time," she told me once. "We grew up and apart. It happens." She didn't talk much about him, which I took as a good sign. There were no photos of him among her things or mementos that I could see. The few times his name came up in conversation, she spoke of him in a neutral way, like one would talk about a former coworker for whom you don't feel anything special. I never worried that he was the one who got away or anything like that. 2 years into our relationship, I proposed to her. We got married 6 months later in a small ceremony with close friends and family. My parents adored her. Her parents seemed to like me enough, and our circle of friends blended perfectly. We settled into married life with an ease that made me feel like the luckiest man in the world. Looking back, I can see the warning signs, though at the time I was too blinded by love to notice them. About a year into our marriage, Sarah started acting a bit strangely. Whenever we would run into mutual acquaintances who knew both her and Marcus, there was a tension in her shoulders, a forced smile. I attributed it to the discomfort anyone might feel talking about an ex. Then last Christmas, Jen, a college friend of Sarah's, came to visit us. After a few glasses of wine, Jen started reminiscing about the good old days, and Marcus' name came up several times. I noticed how Sarah seemed to cling to every mention of him, asking questions with an intensity that seemed strange to me. "How is he doing these days?" Sarah asked, trying to appear casual. "Oh, he's doing really well," Jen replied. "He got that promotion at the architecture firm. Bought that dream lakeside house he always talked about. Single, by the way. No one's topped you, I guess." She stopped abruptly, looking at me with embarrassment. Sarah quickly changed the subject, but later that evening, I caught her checking Marcus' Instagram. She quickly switched apps when she noticed I was watching. "Just curious," she said with a little laugh. "I wanted to see if he still had that horrible goatee." I let it go, but something about that incident stayed in my mind. Still, I trusted Sarah completely. We had a good marriage. We hardly ever fought. We enjoyed the same activities, and we had talked about starting a family in the near future. I told myself I was being paranoid, letting insecurity create problems where there were none. About 4 months ago, Sarah started acting differently. She became distant, often lost in thought. When I asked her what she was thinking about, she would come back to the present with a smile that didn't reach her eyes and say, "Nothing important." Our conversations became shorter, more superficial. She started working late more frequently, and when she was home, she was constantly checking her phone. I'm not proud to admit it, but one evening while she was in the bathroom, I checked her phone. There were no suspicious messages or calls, nothing that indicated she was having an affair. In fact, her digital life seemed too clean, as if it had been wiped. This made me feel both relieved and more suspicious at the same time, which I acknowledge is irrational. During this period, I tried to reconnect with her. I arranged date nights, cooked her favorite meals, bought her small gifts. Sometimes I would glimpse the Sarah of before. She would laugh at my jokes or cuddle up against me on the couch while we watched a movie. But these moments didn't last. Eventually, she would go back to withdrawing into herself, as if she was constantly distracted by something she couldn't share with me. One evening over dinner, I finally confronted her. "Sarah, what's going on? And please don't say nothing. I know something's bothering you." She looked up from her plate, where she was pushing pasta around without eating, with an expression between guilt and surprise. "It's just work stress," she said, but her eyes looked elsewhere. "Is it about us? Aren't you happy in our marriage?" "No, of course not," she replied quickly. "You're perfect. Our marriage is perfect." But the way she said it turned my stomach. It sounded rehearsed, as if she was trying to convince herself more than me. "Is there someone else?" I finally asked the question I feared the most. "God, no," she said, reaching for my hand on the table. "I would never betray you. I love you. It's just I have a lot on my mind with work and family stuff. I promise I'll be myself again soon." I believed her, or at least I wanted to believe her, but something still felt wrong. The night that changed everything started like any other. Sarah was working late again, and I was at home preparing dinner, her favorite lasagna, hoping to have a nice evening together when she got back. I had just put the garlic bread in the oven when her phone rang. She had left it on the counter before leaving that morning, which was unusual. Sarah usually carried her phone as if it were an extension of her hand. I looked at the screen and saw it was Jen calling. I answered, thinking it might be important. "Hello, Sarah's phone," I said. There was a pause on the other end. "Oh, hi. It's Jen. Is Sarah there?" "She's at work. Do you want her to call you back later?" Another pause. "Actually, I thought she was with you. We were supposed to meet for coffee 2 hours ago, but she never showed up. I've called and messaged." My hand tightened around the phone. "She told me she'd be working late tonight." "Oh." Jen's voice sounded small. Maybe I got the day wrong, but by her tone, I knew that wasn't the case. After hanging up, I stood in the kitchen for a long time, staring into space. Why would Sarah lie about working late if she wasn't at work or with Jen? Where was she? I tried calling her, but it went straight to voicemail. I sent a message asking her to call me, trying to sound casual. Then I sat at the dining table with the lasagna cooling and forgotten, and waited. She came home around 9 p.m. with her hair disheveled and looking tired. Her eyes opened a bit wider when she saw me sitting at the table in the dark. "Why are you sitting in the dark?" she asked, turning on the light. "Where were you, Sarah?" Her movement stopped. "At work, like I told you this morning. Jen called your phone earlier. She said you were supposed to meet for coffee, but you never showed up." Sarah's face went through several rapid expressions. Surprise, guilt, calculation, then forced calm. "I completely forgot about coffee with Jen. Work has been so busy that it slipped my mind. Should I call her to apologize?" "So, you were at work?" I insisted. "Yes, of course. Where else would I be?" I wanted to believe her, but something about her demeanor seemed off. She was too calm, her smile too fixed. "I don't know, Sarah. That's what I'm trying to figure out." She came over, wrapped her arms around my neck, and kissed me on the forehead. "You're being silly. I was at work. I forgot the appointment with Jen. End of story. Now, I smell lasagna." I let it go that night, but the seed of doubt was already planted. The next morning, I did something I'm not proud of. I called her office and asked to speak with her. The receptionist told me that Sarah had left early the day before, around 3 p.m., for a personal matter. I didn't confront her immediately. Instead, I started paying more attention to her habits, her excuses, her increasingly elaborate explanations of her whereabouts. The woman I had trusted completely was now a mystery to me, and it was destroying me. It was on a Tuesday that everything came to a head. I was working from home, finishing some reports, when Sarah called me around 2 p.m. with a trembling voice. "Marcus had an accident," she said without preamble. "Is it serious?" "Very serious. Can you take me to Memorial Hospital?" I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. Marcus, her ex from years ago. Why was she so affected by him? And how did she know about the accident? "How did you find out?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Jen called me, she said quickly. Please, can you come get me? I'm at the office. I agreed, my mind racing as I drove to her work. When I picked her up, she was a mess. Mascara smeared, hands shaking as she fastened her seatbelt. What happened to him? I asked as I started driving. Car accident, she said between sobs. He was on his way to meet a client. A truck ran a red light. It hit him on the driver's side. He's in surgery now. I glanced at her out of the corner of my eye. Jen told you all this? Yes, she's friends with his sister. Please drive faster. The hospital was on the other side of town, and the ride was painfully silent except for Sarah's occasional sobs. I tried to make sense of what was happening. Why was my wife so upset about her ex-boyfriend's accident? Friend or not, her reaction seemed over the top. As we pulled into the hospital parking lot, I turned to her. Sarah, why is this affecting you so much? I know it's terrible what happened to Marcus, but... She looked at me with red eyes. Please, she sobbed. I need to be there. I still love him. The world seemed to stop. I felt like I was watching the scene from outside my body. My wife, the person I had planned to spend the rest of my life with, had just admitted that she loved another man, her ex, in the most casual and thoughtless way possible. I remained silent, unable to articulate a word. I drove her to the entrance. I watched her run into the building without even looking back. She didn't thank me. She didn't ask if I was coming in. She didn't acknowledge the bomb she had just dropped on our marriage. At that moment, I ceased to exist for her. I sat in the parking lot for what felt like hours, staring at the hospital entrance. Part of me wanted to follow her in to demand answers, but a larger part knew exactly what was happening. The pieces were falling into place. Her distant behavior, the canceled coffee with Jen, the late nights at work. Sarah was seeing Marcus again. Since when? I didn't know. Did it matter? She still loved him. She had said it with such clarity, with such honesty, that there was no room for misunderstanding. Eventually, I drove home. Our apartment now felt strange to me, as if I was walking through a stranger's life. I sat on the edge of our bed, the bed we had picked out together at IKEA, laughing as we struggled to put it together, and I made my decision. I packed my bags methodically, taking only what I needed. Clothes, personal items, important documents. I left the furniture, the appliances, most of our shared possessions. Material things seemed meaningless now. Meanwhile, memories flooded my mind. Our first date, the day we moved in together, our wedding. Had it all been a lie? Or had Sarah simply settled for me while keeping a flame for her ex? Before leaving, I wrote a brief note and left it on the kitchen counter. Don't worry. Now he can be with you. Simple. To the point. I considered writing more, pouring out my pain, my anger, my sense of betrayal. But what was the point? She had made her decision long before today. I called my friend Mike and asked if I could stay with him for a while. He didn't ask questions, just, sure, brother, with that steadiness that characterized him. Then I took one last look at the apartment that had been my home, our home, and I left, carefully closing the door behind me. That night, I turned off my phone. I wasn't ready to face whatever reaction Sarah might have. The next morning, I called my boss and explained that I needed a few personal days. Then I went to see a lawyer to talk about divorce. Everything felt unreal, as if I was watching someone else's life fall apart. When I finally turned on my phone 3 days later, there were dozens of missed calls and messages from Sarah. The first ones were of confusion. Where are you? What's going on? What did you mean by that note? Then they became desperate. Please call me. We need to talk. It's a misunderstanding. And finally, pleading, I wasn't serious. Please come back. I've made a terrible mistake. I love you, not him. I read them all, feeling almost nothing. The shock had passed, leaving a numb void. I didn't reply to any of her messages, but I did listen to one voicemail. Please call me. Her voice was heavy with tears. What I said in the car. I wasn't thinking clearly. I was only concerned about him as a friend. That's all. I don't love him. I love you. Please come home so we can talk. I'm sorry. Too little, too late. The truth had come out in a moment of emotional honesty, and no attempt to retract it could undo that. Mike let me stay at his place for 2 weeks while I found a small apartment on the other side of town. I threw myself into work, started going to the gym more often, and reconnected with friends I had neglected. On the surface, I seemed to be handling things well. Inside, it was a chaos of confusion, anger, and pain. Sarah continued to call and text. She even came to my office once, but I refused to see her. She sent emails explaining that she was confused, that seeing Marcus injured had awakened past feelings that weren't real, and that our marriage was what mattered to her. Each explanation felt like another betrayal, another lie. Through mutual friends, I learned that Marcus' injuries were serious but not life-threatening. A broken leg, internal bleeding, a concussion, but he was expected to make a full recovery. I also learned that Sarah was visiting him at the hospital every day, spending hours with him. I was only concerned about him as a friend. My thought was ironic. 1 month after I left, Lily, Sarah's younger sister, contacted me. We had always had a good relationship, so I agreed to meet her for coffee. She's devastated, Lily told me, absently stirring her coffee. She knows she made a terrible mistake. In saying she loves him or in seeing him behind my back. Who knows for how long? I asked, unable to hide the resentment in my voice. Lily's eyes widened. What? No, she wasn't seeing him before the accident. Not like that. I raised an eyebrow skeptically. Seriously? Seriously? She insisted. Listen, I'm not defending what she said to you. It was horrible and unforgivable. But they weren't having an affair. At least not a physical one. What does that mean? Lily sighed. They reconnected on social media about 6 months ago. At first, it was just casual catching up. But about 2 months before the accident, they started exchanging long messages, reminiscing about the good old days. She told me because she felt guilty. Even though she hadn't done anything physical, she was confused about her feelings. She should have talked to me about it, I said coldly. I know. I told her that. She was trying to sort it out by herself first, which was stupid. Lily looked down. If it counts for anything, I think she really does love you. She just got caught up in nostalgia and what-ifs. When Marcus got hurt, she panicked and those confused feelings surfaced. And that makes it all better? No. I just thought you should know the whole story. I thanked her for her honesty but said my decision stood firm. Sarah had broken my trust in the most fundamental way possible. Though they hadn't been physically intimate, she had been emotionally unfaithful. And then she lied to cover it up. Some betrayals don't allow for a way back. 3 months after I left, I agreed to meet with Sarah, not to reconcile, but to discuss the division of property and separation formalities. We met at a neutral cafe, and seeing her affected me more than I had anticipated. She looked thinner, pale, with dark circles under her eyes. For a moment, I felt a flash of concern, but I pushed it aside. Thank you for meeting me, she said softly when I sat across from her. I nodded, keeping a neutral expression. I thought it was time to discuss practical matters. Is that all you want to discuss? A glimmer of hope shone in her eyes. Yes, I kept my voice firm. I've initiated divorce proceedings. My lawyer will contact yours. Her face crumbled. Please don't do this. We can get through this. I made a terrible mistake, but I love you. And you're my wife who told me she loves another man, I replied coldly. A man you were apparently in contact with for months without telling me. She paled. Lily told you? Yes, though I appreciate her honesty, unlike yours. I should have told you when Marcus contacted me. I know that now. But nothing physical happened between us. I swear, we were just talking, catching up. Emotional affairs are still affairs, Sarah. She tried to take my hand on the table, but I pulled it away. It wasn't even an emotional affair. Not really. I was confused. Yes, his messages stirred up old memories and I got caught up in nostalgia. But I love you. What I said in the car that day, I was emotional. I wasn't thinking clearly. Those words don't reflect what I truly feel. Then why were you visiting him at the hospital every day? I asked. She seemed surprised that I knew, because I felt responsible in a way. Like the accident happened just as all this drama was unfolding, and I needed to make sure he was okay before rebuilding our marriage. I shook my head, incredulous. You rushed into that hospital without looking back. You didn't care how your words affected me. In that moment, I saw clearly where I stood in your priorities. That's not fair, she protested. I was in shock. People say things they don't mean when they're in shock. Or maybe they say exactly what they feel because they lower their guard, I retorted. Either way, I can't trust you anymore, Sarah. And without trust, what's left? Then she started to cry, silent tears streaming down her face. I made a mistake. Terrible mistake. Are you really going to throw away 5 years together for one moment of confusion? It wasn't just one moment. It was months of lies by omission, of pulling away from me, of making me feel like I was crazy for noticing something was wrong. It was the ease with which you said, I still love him, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. And it was your immediate impulse to lie and cover up afterward instead of having an honest conversation with me. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our broken marriage between us. Finally, I stood up. My lawyer will contact yours with the details. I think it's best if we don't meet like this anymore. And that's it? She asked with a trembling voice. You're not even willing to try to forgive me? I considered her question carefully. Some things can't be taken back, Sarah. There are some trusts that, once broken, don't mend. I hope you find happiness, whether it's with Marcus or someone else, but it won't be with me. As I walked away, she called after me. He means nothing to me now. I realized it as soon as you left. Please don't go. I didn't look back. That was 3 months ago. The divorce is moving forward, though Sarah has put up roadblocks. She refuses to sign the papers and keeps requesting mediation sessions where she begs for another chance. Her persistence would be touching if it weren't so frustrating. Through mutual friends, I've learned that Marcus has fully recovered and tried to rekindle something with Sarah. Apparently, she rejected his advances, telling anyone who would listen that she made the biggest mistake of her life and only wants to save her marriage. Too bad she didn't realize that before telling me she loved another man. I've been going to therapy to process all of this. Some days are better than others. I miss the life we had, or rather, the life I thought we had. I miss the Sarah I thought I knew. But that person doesn't exist and maybe never did. The divorce is proceeding, albeit more slowly than I would like due to Sarah's resistance. Last week, I received a handwritten letter from her. Not a message or an email. In it, she detailed every moment of her reconnection with Marcus, from the first innocent message to the gradual increase in their communication. She admitted feeling flattered by his attention, enjoying the nostalgia of their conversations, and being confused about her feelings. She talked about the day of the accident, how Marcus's sister called her and she panicked, and how in that moment of fear and confusion, old feelings resurfaced. She acknowledged that what she said to me was unforgivable, but insisted it came from temporary madness, not genuine emotion. The letter ended with, I understand now what I couldn't see then. Marcus represented my past, a simpler time before adult responsibilities. I wasn't in love with him, but with the memory of who I was when we were together. But you are my true love, my present, my future. I was a fool to risk you for a ghost. I will spend the rest of my life regretting the pain I caused you, even if you don't give me another chance. But I hope with all my heart that you will. It was well written, seemed sincere, and perhaps contained a grain of truth. But as I folded it and put it away, I knew my decision hadn't changed. Some bells cannot be unrung. Some words cannot be retracted. Some trusts, once destroyed, cannot be rebuilt without leaving cracks. Sarah still calls. Sometimes she still sends messages. She still hopes for reconciliation. But I've moved on, or at least I'm trying to. I've started dating casually. I'm focusing on my career and considering moving to another city for a fresh start. Life goes on even after betrayal. If there's a lesson in all of this, perhaps it's that the most devastating betrayals don't come from calculated malice, but from thoughtless honesty. Sarah didn't plan to destroy our marriage that day in the car. She simply let slip a truth she had been hiding, perhaps even from herself. And in doing so, she revealed that our relationship had been built on quicksand, not solid rock. Or maybe the lesson is more, be careful what you say. In moments of crisis, truth tends to slip out when emotions dominate. Once spoken, some truths can never be retracted. Either way, I continue to move forward. Alone but wiser. Edit. Wow, I didn't expect this post to take off like it did. Thank you all for the comments and messages of support. To answer common questions. Yes, I am certain there was no physical affair before the accident. Mutual friends confirmed this, and Sarah's sister showed me messages where she was hesitant to even write to Marcus. No, I won't change my mind about the divorce. Some suggest couples therapy, and while I appreciate it, there are some breaches of trust too deep to repair. I haven't spoken to Marcus and don't intend to. He is irrelevant to my decision. It's about Sarah's actions and words, not his. For those saying I'm being too harsh, maybe you're right. Maybe with time I'll see things differently. But right now, I can't imagine rebuilding a relationship on such fragile foundations. I deserve someone who doesn't doubt who she loves. Yes, I have the dog now. She's snoring next to me as I write this second edit. It's been a week since the original post. Sarah found it. A friend recognized our situation and sent it to her. At first, she was irritated that I shared something so personal, but after reading the comments, she said she better understands my perspective and the damage she caused. Finally, she'll sign the divorce papers without further delay. In a way, this has given us closure. Yesterday, we had a civilized, almost friendly conversation about dividing our belongings. It was the first time in months that we spoke without tension or tears. On my end, I've accepted a job offer in another state. A fresh start. Those cliches are sometimes true. Thank you all again. This community has helped more than you can imagine. And yes, the dog is coming with me. Now on to the next story. Story 2. My friend kept inviting themselves over for dinner without bringing anything. So I started ordering takeout just for myself. They whined, "Why didn't you make enough for me?" I smirked and said, "I didn't invite you. Let me tell you about Lana." Lana was one of those people you meet and think, "Oh, she seems nice." She had this bubbly, fun personality that made her easy to like at first, but it didn't take long to realize she was a freeloader in the most annoying way possible. I live in Asheville, North Carolina, in a small but cozy house I'm proud of. I've worked hard to create a comfortable, peaceful life for myself. Cooking dinner, sipping on a glass of wine, and watching true crime shows after a long day at work is my version of happiness. I'm a private person. I like my space, I like my quiet, and I love my routines. But Lana didn't respect any of that. I met her through a mutual friend, and at first I didn't mind when she randomly stopped by. She was fun to talk to, and I didn't mind the little company once in a while. But then it started happening more often, always around dinner time. The first time, it felt like a coincidence. I had just pulled a chicken casserole out of the oven when my doorbell rang. There she was, smiling like she just won the lottery. "Oh my gosh, it smells amazing in here," she said as she practically pushed her way into my house. Before I knew it, she was standing in my kitchen staring at the casserole. I didn't have the heart to tell her no, so I grabbed a couple of plates. She piled hers as high like she hadn't eaten all day, and I ended up with the smallest portion. But whatever, it was just one night, right? Wrong. A few days later, it happened again. I was making tacos, and right as I was setting the table, there she was at the door. "Wow, taco night," she said, walking in without even waiting for me to invite her. Again, she helped herself like it was her God-given right. No offer to pitch in. No, "Hey, let me bring something next time." Just a quick thanks for dinner on her way out. After the fourth or fifth time, it became clear this wasn't just a random thing. Lana had figured out I was a decent cook, and now she was treating my house like her personal restaurant. She always had some excuse for showing up. "Oh, I was just in the neighborhood." Or, "I was running errands nearby and thought I'd swing by." Never mind that she lived a good 15 minutes away and that there were no stores or errands near my house. I started feeling annoyed but didn't want to be rude. I tried dropping hints. One night, I told her I had only made enough soup for myself. She laughed and said, "Oh, don't worry, I don't need much," and ladled herself a giant bowl before I could stop her. Another time, I joked about how lucky she was to always show up when dinner was ready, and she just grinned and said, "It's like I have perfect timing." Perfect timing, my ass. The final straw came one Friday night. I'd had a long, awful day at work and just wanted to relax. I made myself a big bowl of spaghetti carbonara, poured a glass of red wine, and settled in to watch my favorite show. Just as I was twirling my first bite of pasta onto my fork, the doorbell rang. I opened the door and there she was, holding a shopping bag. "Hey, I bought some stuff earlier and thought I'd stop by for a minute." She walked in without waiting for me to respond. "Oh, you're having carbonara? Yum." I stared at her. "Yeah, I just made it for myself," I said, trying to hint that she wasn't welcome to it. "Oh, I'm starving," she said, sitting down at my table like it was the most normal thing in the world. "Can I have a plate?" I wanted to scream. Instead, I got up, grabbed a clean plate, and gave her half my dinner. She ate happily and then left as usual, chirping, "Thanks for dinner. You're the best." That night, as I cleaned up what was left of my dinner, I decided enough was enough. I didn't want to be confrontational. I hate confrontation, but I wasn't about to keep feeding someone who had zero respect for me or my boundaries. The next time Lana showed up unannounced, I was ready. I had ordered takeout just for myself, one small portion of sushi. When she came in and saw the single container on my table, she looked confused. "You didn't cook?" she asked, her voice almost accusatory. "Nope," I said casually. "I didn't feel like it tonight." She frowned. "Oh, what's that?" She pointed at my sushi. "Just something I ordered," I said while popping a piece into my mouth. She stared at me for a second like she couldn't believe I wasn't offering to share. Then she sighed dramatically. "I guess I'll just grab something on the way home." "Good idea," I said sweetly. After that, I started ordering takeout every time she came over. Pizza for one, Chinese for one, burgers for one. Each time, her face fell a little more. "You didn't make enough for me?" she whined one night when I had a single serving of pad thai sitting in front of me. "I didn't know you were coming," I said with a shrug. "I only ordered enough for myself." She huffed and mumbled something about how I could have ordered more. I just smiled and kept eating. By this point, she was starting to get the hint, but she was stubborn. She kept showing up and I kept ordering for one. I knew it was petty, but honestly, it felt good. I didn't owe her anything. If she wanted a free meal, she could at least ask first, or better yet, bring something to contribute. Weeks went by and Lana kept up her little game, but I wasn't backing down. Every time she dropped by uninvited, I had my takeout for one strategy ready, and every time she left looking more annoyed. I could tell she was starting to get irritated that her free meals were no longer guaranteed. But then she pulled a move I didn't see coming. It was a Wednesday night and I had just gotten home from work. I was exhausted, running on fumes, and dreading the thought of even boiling water for pasta. So I decided to order takeout again. I grabbed my phone, placed my usual sushi order, and settled into the couch to wait. Not even 20 minutes later, I heard the familiar ding-dong of my doorbell. My stomach sank. I already knew who it was. I opened the door and there she was, all smiles. But this time she wasn't empty-handed. She had a grocery bag dangling from her arm. "Hey, I thought I'd swing by and surprise you," she chirped, stepping inside before I could say a word. "And look, I even brought some stuff to help with dinner." I blinked, unsure what to say. On one hand, it was the first time she had ever brought anything. On the other hand, it was obvious she was trying to weasel her way back into my meals. I glanced at the bag. Inside there was half a loaf of white bread, a jar of cheap marinara sauce, and a bag of pre-shredded mozzarella. That's nice of you, but I've already ordered takeout," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. Her face dropped. "Oh." Her tone went flat, but a second later her smile was back. "Well, that's okay. I can cook this here and we can eat together." She breezed past me into the kitchen, plopping the bag onto my counter like she owned the place. Now I was pissed. She wasn't just inviting herself over. She was inviting herself into my kitchen. But instead of exploding, I walked over to the counter, picked up her grocery bag, and handed it back to her. I appreciate the gesture, but I've had a long day and really just want to eat my takeout and relax, I said firmly. She blinked at me, stunned. Are you serious? I brought this all the way over here. I didn't budge. And I didn't ask you to. For a moment she just stood there glaring at me. Then she huffed, snatched the bag out of my hands, and stormed out the door without another word. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought she had finally gotten the message. But no, Lana wasn't done yet. A few days later, while at work, my phone buzzed with a text from her. Hey, what's for dinner tonight? I'm in the mood for something good. I stared at my phone, completely dumbfounded. Was she serious? After everything? I didn't even respond. I just put my phone down and went back to work. But then the texts kept coming. Should I bring wine? I can be there by 6 o'clock. Hello? Don't leave me hanging. I didn't reply to a single one. I figured she'd take the hint. But when I got home that evening, guess who was waiting for me on my porch? Yep, Lana. She was sitting on the steps scrolling through her phone like it was the most normal thing in the world. When I got out of my car, she looked up and waved. Hey, I was starting to think you weren't coming home. I didn't even bother hiding my irritation. What are you doing here? Lana grinned like we were best friends. I figured you didn't see my texts. I stared at her, sitting on my porch steps like it was the most normal thing in the world. The sky was already darkening and I was exhausted after a long and stressful day at work. The last thing I wanted was to deal with Lana again. I crossed my arms and took a deep breath. I saw them. I just didn't think they needed a response. She let out a forced laugh and shook her head. Wow, so rude. I just wanted to know what's for dinner tonight. You've been so selfish lately. My exhaustion instantly turned into anger. Selfish? Because I don't want you to keep showing up uninvited and eating my food without ever bringing anything. She scoffed and rolled her eyes. Ugh, listen to yourself. You make me sound like a parasite or something. I just like spending time with you, but all you care about is money, food, and rules. Life doesn't have to be like that, you know? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Life doesn't have to be like that? Then how is it supposed to be? I work hard to pay my bills, buy my food, and maintain my house. And you think you can just show up and help yourself because what? Because you enjoy my company? She sighed like I was a child who just didn't understand. You're a man. You wouldn't get it. Everything is easy for you. You work, you get paid, and that's it. For me, it's not like that. I make less, everything is more expensive, and I have so much more to deal with. Do you have any idea how much groceries cost these days? Do you know how long it takes to cook? My jaw dropped. Are you serious right now? You want me to feel sorry for you because you don't want to spend money on food? Everyone has to buy food, Lana. That's just part of life. She crossed her arms and pouted. Yeah, but not everyone has to be so selfish. You always cook these amazing meals and you have a nice house. Would it kill you to share a little? I ran a hand down my face, trying to stay calm. Lana, you're missing the point. It's not about sharing. It's about respect. You don't ask, you don't contribute, you just show up and eat like it's your right. That's not sharing. That's taking advantage. She stood up and put her hands on her hips. Oh, so that's how you see me? As a freeloader? You think I enjoy relying on other people's kindness? You think I don't want to be able to buy my own food without worrying? I didn't choose to live like this, okay? The world is cruel to women like me. I laughed, completely stunned. The world is cruel? You have a job, you have a place to live, you have money to go out with your friends and buy expensive clothes, but you don't want to spend money on food. What's the excuse now? She narrowed her eyes. I don't have to explain my financial choices to you. Oh, now they were financial choices? But somehow it's normal for me to spend my money cooking for you without you even asking. Huh. She sighed dramatically and threw her head back. Ugh, you don't get it. I'm a woman. I already have enough to deal with and now you expect me to worry about food too? You have no idea what it's like to have to choose between paying a bill or buying a decent dinner. But you do know what it's like to choose between paying a bill and buying new clothes or going out drinking, huh? I shot back. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. You don't want to spend money on food because you see it as a waste. You want someone to cover it for you, but you don't want to admit you're mooching. And when you get called out, you play the victim and say it's society's fault. She crossed her arms tighter, her foot tapping against the ground, clearly irritated. Look, if you wanted me to bring food so badly, why didn't you just say so? I laughed again, but this time out of pure disbelief. I've hinted at it plenty of times, Lana. I told you I didn't have enough food. I asked you to bring something. I made it clear I wasn't cooking for you anymore. But instead of getting the message, you ignored it and kept showing up. And now that I'm calling you out directly, you're playing the victim. She sighed and looked down at the ground. Fine. If that's how you want to be, whatever. I thought we were friends. But clearly all you care about is money. And all you care about is not spending yours. She glared at me, her eyes full of anger. You're awful. I thought you were different, but in the end, you're just like all the others. A selfish man who thinks everyone should fend for themselves and has no understanding of how hard things are for women. I took a step back and pointed toward the street. You can leave now. She stood there for a moment like she couldn't believe I was actually kicking her out. But in the end, she scoffed, stormed down the steps, and walked away without looking back. I don't need your food. Okay? I can take care of myself. Great. Do that. As soon as she was gone, I closed the door and let out a long breath. For the first time in months, I felt like my home was truly mine again. I don't need your food. Okay? I can take care of myself. Those were Lana's last words that night, or at least that's what I thought. Days passed and my home became my sanctuary again. No unexpected visits. No hiding my food. No persistent presence leeching off me. But the peace didn't last as long as I had hoped. One random Tuesday, after a long, exhausting day at work, I got home and noticed something on the floor near my door. It was an envelope. Curious, I picked it up and saw that it was a handwritten letter from Lana. Hey, it's been a while, huh? I hope you're doing well. I've been thinking a lot and I think we can get past this silly misunderstanding. I wanted to invite you to dinner, but I already know you'll say you're busy, so I thought I'd just stop by instead. Don't worry. This time I'll bring something. See you at 7 p.m. Hugs. I stared at the letter with a mix of disgust and disbelief. She had no shame, but this time she wouldn't get away with it. I got home early the next day and went straight to the kitchen. I took a piece of chicken, seasoned it as usual, and let it marinate. Everything seemed normal so far. But then, I grabbed a plastic bag and headed to my cat's litter box. I had to hold my breath while I scooped up a generous amount of cat feces mixed with litter, then returned to the kitchen. I cut it into tiny pieces, mixed it into the sauce, and stirred it well, making sure everything blended in perfectly. The smell wasn't too bad after cooking, but I knew the taste would still be there. At 7 p.m. sharp, the doorbell rang. I opened the door and there she was, all smiles, holding a single can of cheap soda. Of course. Her "this time I'll bring something" meant bringing the bare minimum. Hey, wow, it's been so long. I hope you made something delicious. I'm starving. I flashed my best fake smile and motioned for her to come in. Of course, Lana. I made something special just for you tonight. She went straight to the table as always, without even pretending to be polite or considerate. I grabbed the plates and served her first. It smells amazing, she said, already scooping up a big bite. Hope you like it, I said, barely holding back my laughter. She took a generous forkful and shoved it into her mouth. I watched intently. For a second she furrowed her brows as if analyzing the taste. But since she was always a cheap freeloader used to eating anything for free, she shrugged and swallowed. It's different, but well seasoned. What is it? I stayed silent, just smiling. She took another bite and another and another. After more than half the plate was gone, I knew it was time. You really like it, huh? I asked, my eyes glinting with mischief. She smiled. Of course. You always cook so well. That's when I dropped the bomb. Glad to hear it. because the special ingredient was cat shit. Her plate flew out of her hands instantly. "What?" she screamed, her eyes wide in horror. I crossed my arms and kept my tone calm. "That's right. You wanted so badly to eat here, to take advantage of me again, so I thought I'd serve you something special." She ran to the sink, spitting and gagging, frantically rinsing out her mouth. "You're insane. You're an effing psychopath," she screamed, spitting again. I simply shrugged. "I tried every way possible to get rid of you, Lana, but you wouldn't take the hint. Now you finally have." She looked at me with pure hatred. "You made me eat shit." Then she lunged at me. She tried to slap me, but I caught her wrist in midair. "Get out of my house," I said, my voice low but firm. She struggled, spitting every insult she could think of, but I shoved her toward the door. "Leave. Now." She huffed, grabbed her bag, and stormed out, still spitting on the ground outside. Before leaving, she looked at me with pure disgust and said, "You're a horrible person. I never want to see you again." I laughed. Perfect. Mission accomplished. She cursed me a few more times before disappearing into the night. I never saw Lana again after that night. Rumor has it she got sick after dinner. She probably got an infection or ended up in the hospital, but honestly, I didn't care. She had plenty of chances to stop, to respect my boundaries, to understand that friendship doesn't mean exploitation. But she chose to push my patience to the limit, and she paid the price. Do I regret it? Not at all. My home finally became a place of peace again. No unexpected visits, no persistent messages, no leech trying to take advantage. And that was the last time anyone dared to invite themselves to my dinner without being welcome. Now on to the next story. Story 3. Our whole family was planning a vacation together. But when my husband's childhood friend, Bianca, found out, she begged to join us. Without a second thought, Leonardo canceled my plane ticket and gave it to her, arranging for me to travel in a hard seat on a 36-hour train ride. I looked over at my in-laws and, to my surprise, they all agreed with my husband's decision, so I went along with the plan. I took my train ticket and traveled west. I ended up staying away for 3 months, and the whole family panicked. It was rare for my husband to get an extended vacation, so our family decided to take a long trip together. I started planning everything 6 months in advance, choosing destinations, creating an itinerary, and booking everything. Since everyone in the family was so hands-off, I ended up being responsible for flights, hotels, meals, and all activities. I didn't mind doing the work as long as everyone was happy. Flights were hard to book, so I purchased tickets for the entire family early on. When my sister-in-law mentioned she had never experienced first class, I even paid out of pocket to upgrade everyone's tickets. Shortly before we were set to leave, my husband suddenly told me that Bianca had heard about the trip and wanted to join us. "Our flight is full, so you'll need to take the train. I've already bought your ticket," he said, sending me the electronic train ticket via WhatsApp. "What's the meaning of this?" I asked. "This is supposed to be a family trip, and you're bringing Bianca along?" "If Bianca wants to come, I have to bring her. She's practically family," Leonardo replied. I was furious. "When my sister asked to join us, you were very clear that this was a family trip and you didn't want to bring anyone from outside. Now that Bianca wants to come, you agree immediately?" "Bianca and your sister are different," he said. "We're closer. We're practically family." I scoffed in disbelief. "I bought the plane tickets ages ago. Why do I have to take the train? There are no seats left on the flight, so I had to refund your ticket and get one for Bianca. The only option left for you is the train." Leonardo shrugged, completely indifferent to my opinion. I looked at the electronic ticket he sent. It was for a 36-hour hard seat. "So you bought Bianca a first-class plane ticket while I sit for 36 hours on a train?" I asked incredulously. He smirked. "Didn't you say you liked watching the scenery from the train? Here's your chance to see it all." I looked toward my in-laws. My father-in-law quickly turned his face away. My mother-in-law tried to comfort me. "Camilla, Bianca and Leonardo have been friends since they were little. They have so much to talk about. It makes sense for them to sit together. Just bear with it for now, We'll meet up once you arrive. My sister-in-law, Julia, chimed in. Sis, Bianca has a delicate constitution. There's no way she could handle such a long train ride. You're strong and healthy. You can manage. I laughed bitterly. Who is she, actually? It's starting to look like Bianca is your real daughter-in-law. Leonardo frowned. It's just a train ride. It's not a big deal, and Bianca is practically family to us. It's only fair to ensure she's comfortable. Can you be a bit more gracious and set a good example? At that moment, the doorbell rang. My sister-in-law ran to open it. It was Bianca. Bianca, you're here. I've been waiting for you, Julia said enthusiastically as she dragged Bianca's 2 large suitcases into the house. Oh, Bianca, I missed you so much. If you hadn't gone abroad, you could have married my brother and we'd all be family, she exclaimed, hugging Bianca. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law held Bianca's hand and said, Exactly. I always thought you and Leonardo would be the perfect match. In my heart, I've always seen you as my daughter-in-law. No one else could compare to you. They said this openly in front of me without a hint of shame. At that moment, my heart grew cold toward this family. Although Bianca and Leonardo had been childhood sweethearts, when Leonardo's family fell on hard times, she left the country without hesitation. It was me who helped the family repay a $500,000 debt. And out of gratitude, Leonardo married me. I had given so much to this family. My parents-in-law weren't in great health, and I've been caring for Julia since she was 10. Handling everything from cooking and laundry to picking her up from school, helping with her homework, and attending her parent-teacher meetings. Now she was 15, and I had essentially raised her for 5 years. Though I was only her sister-in-law, I felt more like her mother. I had been generous to my in-laws as well, giving them a monthly allowance of $10,000 and taking care of all the household chores and meals, practically spoon-feeding them. Instead of feeling like a daughter-in-law, I often felt more like a live-in maid who paid out of her own pocket to care for this family. I never expected something in return, but despite all I'd done for them, they still treated me as less than an outsider. Bianca walked up to me with a smug smile. Sorry, Camila. If I hadn't suddenly decided to join, you wouldn't have missed out on the plane ticket and been stuck with a train seat. At first, I thought I'd skip the trip since there weren't any tickets, but Leonardo said he'd handle it. I didn't expect he'd make you take the train, though. I even offered to take the train myself, but Leonardo was worried about me sitting alone for so long, so I guess I have to thank you for taking the inconvenience. Julia looped her arm affectionately around Bianca's. Exactly. There are all kinds of people on trains, and if a girl like you were targeted by some creeps, what would we do? Camilla, on the other hand, has such a fierce look. Like a warrior. She'd scare them off in no time. When she finished speaking, the two of them burst into laughter. Seeing the anger on my face, Leonardo softened his tone. All right, I know this arrangement isn't ideal for you, but it's the best solution we have. Just last week you were eyeing that bag you wanted. Why not go ahead and get it? I held out my hand. Sure. $5,000. That's so expensive. I already agreed you could get it, but now you want me to pay too? Don't push it, he snapped. I smirked and sarcastically replied, Since when do I need your permission to spend my own money? How much do you even earn in a month? At that instant, his face flushed with embarrassment. His monthly salary was only $3,000, while I earned $100,000. His salary didn't even cover his own expenses. I'd been supporting this household from the start. When we got married, he didn't give me any dowry. I paid off that debt and even added $30,000 as a wedding gift. Plus, I bought our house. This comfortable life they now enjoyed was all thanks to me. If they loved Bianca that much, then they could have her as their daughter-in-law instead. Camila, hurry up and make dinner. It's already late and everyone's hungry, my mother-in-law urged. I didn't reply to her and turned to Bianca with a smile. Bianca, you and Leonardo grew up together, so I assume you used to eat here a lot? Of course. Back then, Leonardo and I practically had every meal together, Bianca chirped. So after all these years abroad, you must really miss Mom's cooking, right? I looked at my mother-in-law and continued, Mom, shouldn't you get started on dinner for Bianca? After speaking, I sat down on the couch and turned on the TV. Shortly after, Leonardo came over, annoyed. How could you make Mom cook? You know her health isn't great. Get up and make dinner. Feigning surprise, I replied, Mom, you're unwell? Is it serious? Why didn't you tell me? My mother-in-law snapped back, irritated. Who's unwell? I'm fine. Stop trying to curse me. Then why don't you want to cook for Bianca? Don't feel like it? I asked in amusement. Instantly, her expression soured. Who said I wouldn't cook? She went to the kitchen and spent the next 2 hours preparing dinner. When it was ready, Julia pulled Bianca into my seat. Sis, Bianca is a guest. You don't mind giving up your spot, right? My mother-in-law chimed in, handing me a bowl. If sitting at the edge is uncomfortable, why don't you take your plate to the kitchen and eat there? And while you're at it, clean up a bit. So now I wasn't even allowed at the table. No need. You all enjoy. My friend invited me out, so I'll eat with them. I flatly declined. Leonardo looked irritated. We're leaving for our trip tomorrow and you're still going out? Did you pack yet? Don't you have hands? Why don't you pack? I argued back. Stunned by my response, he fell silent and I headed out. I treated myself to a high-end dinner at a fancy restaurant, ordering steak, wine, and lobster. With my own money, I could dine wherever I wanted. I stayed out until well past midnight, enjoying my time. When I returned, the house was dark. Despite me being out so late, no one had called or texted to check in. Apparently, they had all gone to bed without a second thought. Feeling my way through the darkness, I entered the bedroom and sat on the bed, only to be startled by a piercing scream. Ah! I quickly turned on the light and saw Bianca lying in my spot. The sight made my blood boil. Without thinking, I slapped her across the face. Bianca burst into tears and Leonardo sat up, shielding her. Why did you hit Bianca? We were just talking and must have fallen asleep accidentally. Oh, really? So you just accidentally ended up in bed together? Holding each other? I huffed in anger. We were waiting for you. You were out so late, so Bianca stayed to keep me company. We talked for a while and then we fell asleep. It's perfectly normal. Leonardo thundered. Then why didn't you call or text me? Too busy talking with your best friend? And you two couldn't wait in the living room and had to come to the bedroom. Leonardo scowled. You're being unreasonable, Camilla. I was done arguing. I turned to Bianca. I'm back now, so why don't you leave? Or do you expect all three of us to share the bed? Ignoring my remarks, Bianca clutched her face and whimpered, Leonardo, it really hurts. Leonardo, filled with concern, replied, I'll get you some medicine. After they left the room, I immediately shut the bedroom door and locked it. Then I changed all the bed sheets and covers, put on earbuds, and went straight to sleep. The next morning, Leonardo stormed up to me, furious. What was that last night? I knocked for a long time, yet you didn't open the door. Mom and Dad woke up because of it. You did that on purpose, didn't you? Sneering, I deadpanned. Yes, I did it on purpose. I thought I'd give you a chance to sleep with Bianca. You should be thanking me. Hearing my words, Leonardo looked exasperated. Are you nuts, Camila? Why would I sleep with Bianca? After that morning, something inside me shattered completely. It wasn't just anger. It was a mix of humiliation, exhaustion, and a clarity I had never felt before. I spent the entire day pretending everything was fine, helping with the final preparations for the trip, but inside, my mind was racing. Every word, every gesture from these people seemed to push me further toward an inevitable decision. At dinner, I sat at the table observing the dynamic around me. Bianca was laughing loudly, holding Julia's hand, making exaggerated comments about how excited she was for the trip. My father-in-law barely looked at me, too busy with his phone, and my mother-in-law intentionally ignored my presence, treating Bianca like she was the host of the house. Leonardo, as usual, acted like nothing was wrong, as if this whole situation was perfectly normal. I knew if I spoke up, they'd accuse me of making a scene or not understanding their bond. So I stayed silent, letting my disdain grow like a poisonous plant inside me. After dinner, While everyone was laughing in the living room, I went upstairs and started packing, but not for the trip. I gathered important documents, credit cards, and some valuable items, packing them discreetly into a small suitcase. I left most of my clothes behind, since my departure needed to be quick and quiet. Before heading downstairs, I took off my wedding ring and placed it on the dresser. I stared at it for a moment, feeling nothing. It meant nothing to me anymore. I walked down the stairs calmly, glancing at the scene in the living room. Leonardo was sprawled on the couch with Bianca sitting beside him, laughing at something she said. Julia was taking selfies with Bianca while my mother-in-law brought tea for everyone. No one noticed when I grabbed my bag and walked out the front door without looking back. I hailed a cab and went straight to a hotel. I didn't want to return to my parents' house, where I'd likely be judged or pressured to save my marriage. That night, I started organizing my next steps. I called the bank, froze all joint accounts, and canceled the credit cards under Leonardo's name. I also messaged my lawyer, asking him to initiate divorce proceedings immediately. The next morning, I went to the bank in person to transfer money from our joint accounts to my personal one. Leonardo had no savings of his own and could barely cover his expenses with his $3,000 salary. Without my financial support, I knew he wouldn't be able to maintain the comfortable lifestyle he'd grown used to. Later that afternoon, Leonardo began texting and calling me. "Where are you? Did you forget your passport? Why aren't you answering?" I read his messages but didn't respond. That evening, Bianca called me from her number. I ignored it, but she left a voicemail. "Camilla, this is getting serious. Leonardo is really worried. You should have handled this more maturely. I don't know what you think you're doing, but it's not helping anyone. If you need help, I can talk to you." Help? I laughed bitterly in my hotel room. Bianca genuinely thought she had the moral high ground to lecture me about maturity. I blocked her number immediately. The following day, I visited the house I had bought with my own money and instructed my lawyer to start the process of removing Leonardo from the property. I wasn't about to let him live off me any longer while treating me like dirt. Since he had contributed nothing financially, my lawyer assured me the house was legally mine. Before leaving town, I stopped by my parents' place and made it clear I didn't want interference or any attempts at reconciliation. I briefly explained what had happened and told them I needed time for myself. They seemed shocked but understanding. Leonardo eventually managed to contact me through his father's phone. "Camila, what do you think you're doing? You can't just disappear like this and leave us all worried. What kind of wife does that?" My laughter was cold. What kind of husband gives his wife's plane ticket to his mistress disguised as a childhood friend? "Leonardo, you should be grateful I put up with this for as long as I did. Now enjoy your new life. I hope Bianca can afford to support you, because I'm done." "You can't do this to me, Camila. It's not fair. Think about Julia, about my parents. You can't just abandon us. I've already done more for your family than you deserve. Maybe it's time for all of you to learn how to fend for yourselves." I hung up before he could respond. I felt a mix of relief and anger. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Over the next few days, Leonardo and Bianca tried different tactics to reverse the situation. First, he tried to reconcile, claiming I was overreacting. Then Bianca attempted to play the peacemaker, saying she didn't know how much her presence had upset me. I didn't care. I was gone. I left the city for a few months and focused on myself. I revisited personal projects I had put on hold and started rebuilding my life away from all that toxicity. When I returned, things had drastically changed. Leonardo, desperate, filed a claim to try and get part of my assets. He claimed he was entitled to the house, but when I learned that Leonardo had filed a claim to take part of my assets, I wasn't surprised. It was predictable that he would try to exploit some loophole. After all, he had never been capable of supporting himself, let alone someone like Bianca, who seemed to live in a fantasy world funded by others. What he didn't expect was that I was prepared. On the day of the hearing, I entered the courtroom with my lawyer, head held high. Leonardo was there, accompanied by Bianca, who seemed eager to show how much she was supporting him. But their confidence quickly turned to unease when my lawyer presented evidence proving that I had paid for everything. The house, the family's $500,000 debt, and all household expenses. He also revealed bank statements showing that Leonardo had spent over 80% of the joint account funds on luxuries, often gifts for Bianca, as made clear by receipts included in the evidence. As my lawyer laid out the case, it became apparent to everyone in the courtroom that Leonardo had no right to my assets. He hadn't contributed anything financially or emotionally during the marriage. Even the judge seemed irritated by his audacity in trying to claim what wasn't his. Bianca, who had been smiling smugly, started to look visibly uncomfortable as more evidence piled up. But I wasn't done yet. When it was my turn to speak, I stood and looked directly at Leonardo. For years, I was your wife, your partner, and the only reason your family managed to recover from financial ruin. I paid off your debts, supported your home, cared for your parents, and practically raised your sister. And how did you repay me? By giving away my plane ticket to your so-called childhood friend, letting her take my place in every sense of the word while I was treated like an unpaid servant. And now you have the audacity to come here and try to take what's mine? The house that I bought with my own money. Leonardo tried to interject, but the judge silenced him, reminding him that he would have his chance to speak. I continued, turning to Bianca. As for you, Bianca, you act like you're special, like you're above everyone else. But deep down, you're just someone who leeches off others. You left this country when his family faced financial troubles, only to return when their comfortable life was restored thanks to me. And now you're sitting here thinking you'll walk away with something? Let me make this clear. You two deserve each other because you're both shallow, selfish, and have nothing of substance to offer anyone. Bianca turned red, looking nervously around the courtroom, while Leonardo avoided meeting my gaze. The judge, after hearing everything, not only denied Leonardo's claim but also ordered him to pay court costs and a fine for filing a baseless lawsuit. When the verdict was read, I felt a wave of satisfaction wash over me. They had tried to take everything, but I walked out with my dignity intact and theirs in shreds. After the hearing, Leonardo tried to approach me in the hallway. Camila, wait, can we talk? I looked at him, unable to hide a bitter laugh. Talk? Now you want to talk? After everything? No, Leonardo, I think I've heard enough. Enjoy your new life with Bianca. I hope she's ready to support you, because I'm done. I walked out of the courthouse without looking back. There was nothing more to say or hear. In the months that followed, I heard that Leonardo's life fell apart without my financial support. He lost his car and was evicted from the house he was living in. Bianca, of course, vanished as quickly as she had reappeared in his life, leaving him to deal with the consequences of his choices alone. I heard he had moved back in with his parents, who were also struggling now that my assistance was gone. Meanwhile, my life moved forward. I invested in myself, grew in my career, and even bought a new home, bigger and more beautiful than the last one. I realized that the freedom of not carrying the weight of ungrateful people was the greatest wealth I could have. I made new friends, reconnected with old ones, and allowed myself to live without fear of being manipulated or taken advantage of. One day, while walking through the city center, I saw Leonardo sitting on a park bench, looking tired and defeated. He noticed me, but before he could say anything, I turned and walked away. He was a ghost of my past, and I had no interest in resurrecting him. At last I was free. Free from them, their manipulations, their ingratitude, and the burden of supporting a family that had never valued me. For the first time in years, my life truly felt like my own. Now on to the next story. Story 4. My name's Jerry. I'm 28, and I never thought my life would unravel the way it did that night. One moment I was driving home from work, a little tired, but relieved the week was finally over. And the next, I was waking up in a hospital bed, wires running across my chest, the rhythmic beeping of machines surrounding me. My body ached in places I didn't even know could ache. For a while, I couldn't quite piece together how bad it was. What I did know, however, was that I had no one sitting in the chair next to me. The space was empty, sterile, and painfully quiet. My fiancée, Mia, was supposed to be that person. We'd been together for almost 5 years. And though things hadn't been perfect, there had been little cracks lately, arguments that ended unresolved, and an unsettling amount of time she spent with her so-called best friend, Mark. I still believed she cared enough to show up when I needed her most. That's why, as soon as I was able to reach for my phone, I called her. I still remember the way my voice trembled, the weight of the tube in my arm making me feel more fragile than I ever had in my life. When she answered, there was a swell of relief, like maybe this wouldn't be as lonely as it seemed. But instead of concern, instead of the panic I thought I'd hear in her voice, there was laughter in the background. Silverware clinking, the hum of conversation and music. Then Mia's voice, light and casual, said, "I can't leave right now. I'm out with Mark." My stomach dropped, and for a moment, I thought maybe I had misheard. Maybe she hadn't just brushed off the fact that I was in a hospital bed after a car accident. But she said it again, more firmly this time, as if my asking her to come was an inconvenience. I remember staring at the 4-drip, wondering how someone who promised forever could dismiss me in the moment I felt most vulnerable. I didn't argue. I didn't even know how. I just lay there, the phone pressed weakly to my ear, trying to keep my voice from breaking as I said, "Okay, I understand." She muttered something about calling later and hung up, her laughter drifting through the line before it cut. That was the first sting, the first sign that maybe the woman I thought would be my future had already chosen a different path. The nurses tried to comfort me, but they had their rounds, their routines. My family? They were complicated. My parents had always been quick to take Mia's side in things. Whenever we fought, I was the one told to stop being dramatic or learn to be more patient. Mia was charming, always smiling in front of them, always saying the right things. They adored her, so the thought of calling them felt pointless. I could already hear my mother's voice. "Jerry, she's young. You can't expect her to drop everything for you all the time." As though me being hooked up to machines was somehow trivial compared to her dinner with Mark. So, I sat in that room listening to the beeping, watching the shadows stretch across the ceiling. For the first time in years, I felt truly alone. And yet, as the loneliness pressed down, so did something else. Something sharp, simmering beneath the surface. It wasn't anger yet. More like a seed of realization that maybe, just maybe, I'd been blind to the truth for too long. That seed began to grow when the nurse came in later that night, a phone in her hand. "Your fiancé is on the line," she said. Her expression caught somewhere between sympathy and disapproval. I took the phone, my chest tightening, expecting another dismissive excuse. But the nurse leaned closer, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "You might want to stay on. He might not make it through the night." In that moment, I realized Mia's laughter wouldn't last forever. Something was about to break. The nurse's words must have landed like a weight on Mia's end of the line because the laughter I'd heard earlier faded instantly. For a moment, there was silence, and then her voice. Shaky, uncertain. "Jerry, what do you mean you might not make it?" The nurse said that. I wanted to tell her how scared I was, how I could barely breathe without pain tearing through my ribs, how the doctor had said internal bleeding wasn't ruled out yet. But all I could muster was a flat, "Yeah, that's what she said." I let the silence hang, almost daring her to leave the restaurant, to come sit in the chair beside me like any partner would. But instead of saying she was on her way, Mia sighed. I'll check in later tonight. Just don't freak out. Okay?" And just like that, the line went dead again. The hollowness in my chest had nothing to do with broken bones. It was the kind of emptiness you feel when you know you're not anyone's priority. That realization cut deeper than the accident itself. I spent that night staring at the door, half expecting her to walk in, convincing myself she'd change her mind. She didn't. The next morning, my parents finally showed up, but not in the way I'd imagined. My mom walked in with a frown, not of concern for me, but for Mia. "She called us crying last night," Mom said, dropping her purse on the visitor's chair. "She said you scared her half to death with how dramatic you were being." My dad, standing behind her with his arms crossed, added, "Son, you need to understand. Mia is young." She panicked. "You can't hold it against her." There I was, pale and stitched up, hooked to machines that were literally keeping me stable. and they were worried about Mia's feelings. I wanted to scream. Instead, I just swallowed hard, letting their words settle like stones in my gut. She didn't come, I whispered. She was with Mark. My mom waved her hand, brushing it off like I'd complained about the weather. Mark's harmless. You know he's her best friend. Don't start with that jealousy nonsense again. If you keep this up, you're going to push her away. Push her away? As though my being in an accident, as though nearly dying, was somehow an act of selfishness on my part. I lay there listening to them defend her, and a memory came back to me. Last month, when I caught Mia texting Mark at 2 a.m., laughing at something he'd sent, I'd asked her about it and she'd snapped, "You don't get to control who I talk to. Stop being insecure." And then, when I tried to explain how it made me uncomfortable, she called my mom to complain that I was suffocating her. My mom had given me the same lecture then, too. It wasn't the first time Mia had pulled that stunt, weaponizing my own family against me. Whenever she wanted the upper hand, she knew just who to call. And my parents, blinded by her charm, never failed to take her side. I'd been painted as the jealous, controlling one, while she got away with whatever she pleased. That morning in the hospital, the pattern was so clear it made my head spin. Even when I was broken and bedridden, they were still bending over backwards to defend her. My dad leaned in, lowering his voice as though imparting some great wisdom. "Son, women like Mia don't come around often. Don't ruin it over your pride." His words tasted bitter in my ears. Pride? Was it pride to want your partner to care whether you lived or died? I clenched my fists, the four-needle tugging slightly at my skin, and realized something important. I wasn't the one ruining anything. I was just finally seeing the cracks for what they were. Later that day, Mia finally showed up. She breezed into the room carrying a cup of coffee like it was just another errand on her to-do list. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup fresh. She looked like she'd had a good night's sleep, maybe even a fun one. She kissed my forehead lightly, almost absently, then sat down and pulled out her phone. "So, how are you feeling?" she asked, her eyes still glued to the screen. I stared at her, searching for something. Guilt, fear, relief, but found none. "I thought you'd come last night," I said quietly. She didn't look up. "I told you, Jerry, I couldn't just ditch Mark. He would have felt abandoned. And you were fine. Obviously fine." That word echoed in my head, bouncing around until it burnt. She didn't see the bruises, the stitches, the machines. She didn't see me. When she finally put her phone away, it was only to tell me that my mom had called her, reassuring her I wasn't mad. She smiled as she said it, as if the matter had been settled. That's when I knew I wasn't just dealing with Mia anymore. I was dealing with a whole system, her, my parents, their blind favoritism that had decided my voice didn't matter. And sitting in that hospital bed, I realized something was shifting inside me. The seed of realization from the night before was sprouting into something sharper, stronger. It wasn't rage yet, but it was getting close. The day I was supposed to be discharged, everything shifted. Up until then, I'd been walking on eggshells, convincing myself maybe I was just being too sensitive, maybe I was misinterpreting things. But then Mia did something that stripped away the last bit of illusion I had left about her, about my family, about all of it. The doctor came in that morning with a serious look on his face, explaining that I needed to take it easy for at least a month. No work, no stress, and definitely no driving. He recommended a follow-up surgery in a few weeks just to stabilize some of the internal injuries. It wasn't life-threatening anymore, but it was still serious. As he spoke, I could feel Mia shifting in her chair beside me, fidgeting with her phone. I thought maybe she was nervous for me. I was wrong. As soon as the doctor left, she leaned forward and whispered, "So, this whole recovery thing? It's going to be really hard for me, too, you know?" I blinked at her, confused. "Hard for you?" She sighed, rolling her eyes like I was a child. "Jerry, I can't spend the next month babysitting you. I have my own life, my own plans. I've got a work trip coming up with Mark, and I can't just cancel because you're stuck at home. My mom already said it's not fair to expect me to put everything on hold." I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. A work trip with Mark. She didn't even try to hide it anymore. Mia, I said slowly, trying to keep my voice steady. I almost died. And you're talking about vacations with him. She crossed her arms, defensive. It's not a vacation. And don't make this about him. This is about you not respecting my independence. You're always so controlling. That word again. Controlling. It hit me like a slap. And as if that wasn't enough, my parents walked in at that exact moment, catching the tail end of our argument. Mia didn't waste a second. She turned to them with a wounded expression and said, I'm trying my best, but Jerry just doesn't trust me. He keeps accusing me of things. Like clockwork, my mom rushed to her defense. Jerry, stop it. Can't you see how much she's sacrificing for you? You're lucky she's even here after the way you've been treating her. My dad chimed in, shaking his head in disappointment. If you keep this up, son, you're going to lose her. And frankly, I wouldn't blame her. I just sat there, stunned. They didn't ask what happened. They didn't ask what I needed. They didn't even notice how pale I'd gone from the stress of the argument. They just circled around Mia, soothing her, while I, broken, bruised, and barely stitched together, became the villain in my own hospital room. And then came the breaking point. While I was signing the discharge papers, the nurse asked about payment details for the extra scans and procedures. Mia cut in before I could even respond. Oh, he'll cover it. He always does. But if not, I can ask Mark to spot us. She said it so casually, like it was normal for her best friend to step in where she wouldn't. The nurse gave me a strange look, her eyebrows raised as though she just uncovered a secret. My hands trembled as I signed the form, trying to ignore the hot flush creeping up my neck. That wasn't just inconsiderate. It was humiliating. She was telling hospital staff in front of my parents that another man had more reliability in my life than I did. Something snapped in me then. It wasn't a loud snap. It wasn't rage or yelling or throwing things. It was quiet, cold. A realization so sharp it almost felt like clarity. I looked at Mia, her perfect hair, her carefully practiced expressions, her casual cruelty, and I knew the trust I'd been clinging to, the belief that she loved me deep down, was gone. Completely gone. I didn't say anything to her in that moment. I didn't argue, didn't beg. But inside I felt the shift. The part of me that had always tried to excuse her, to believe my parents' favoritism was just their way, was gone. Something darker, calmer was settling in. A plan I hadn't yet formed, but knew I would. That night, as I lay in my own bed for the first time since the accident, staring at the ceiling in silence, I realized that the person I thought was my partner had betrayed me in the most fundamental way. And what was worse, my own family had handed her the knife. The first week at home was a blur of painkillers, shallow breaths, and restless nights. Every time I tried to sit up, my ribs screamed in protest. Every cough sent waves of pain through my body. But worse than the physical pain was the silence. Mia didn't move in to take care of me. She didn't even adjust her schedule. She'd stop by once every couple of days, usually in the evening after she'd already spent time out with Mark, and drop off some takeout as though that absolved her of everything. She'd kiss me on the cheek, her perfume lingering longer than her presence, and then be gone again. My parents weren't any better. They called often, but the calls were less about me and more about how stressed Mia was, how I needed to be patient with her. My mother even said, "She's been such a saint through all this, Jerry. You don't realize how much she's doing for you." I remember staring at the phone after she said that. The absurdity of it left me speechless. A saint? The woman who laughed in a restaurant while I was fighting for my life? The loneliness crept in like fog, heavy and suffocating. I spent hours scrolling through old photos on my phone. Pictures of Mia and me from when things were good. Vacations, birthdays, even silly selfies in the kitchen. In every one of them, I looked happy. Or maybe I just looked blind. I kept asking myself, when did it change? Was it gradual, like water boiling so slowly you don't realize until it's too late? Or was it always this way and I just refused to see it? One night, after a particularly brutal wave of pain that left me gasping, I reached for my phone and called Mia. I just wanted her voice, some reassurance. She answered on the second ring, but her tone was clipped, annoyed. "Jerry, I'm out. Can this wait?" I could hear laughter in the background, glasses clinking, music pulsing. It was Mark's laugh. I didn't even need to ask. I hung up without saying a word. That was the moment I stopped waiting for her to care. But stopping didn't mean healing. If anything, it plunged me deeper into a kind of quiet despair. I withdrew from everyone. I stopped answering my parents' calls. I stopped asking Mia when she'd be over. I started eating less, sleeping less, letting the world blur into one long, dull ache. I was existing, not living. And yet, in that hollow space, something else began to stir. One afternoon, when Mia finally did show up, she walked in talking about how she and Mark were planning a trip for work. She said it so casually, as if I wasn't lying there half-broken, as if my world hadn't been turned upside down. She even added, "Don't worry, I'll send you pictures." Something inside me shifted then. Not rage, not even heartbreak, just clarity. I realized I couldn't keep clinging to the life I thought I had. I couldn't keep waiting for people who never chose me. My parents had chosen her. She had chosen him. And me? I had chosen silence for too long. That night, for the first time since the accident, I got out of bed without calling anyone for help. It hurt like fire. Every step was a reminder of my broken body. But I made it to the desk in my room, pulled out a notebook, and started writing. Not a letter, not a plea, just notes. Observations, dates, things Mia had said, things my parents had done. It wasn't a plan yet, but it was the beginning of one. Because if I couldn't rely on them, I'd rely on myself. And maybe, just maybe, I'd find a way to make sure every slight, every betrayal, every cruel laugh they'd shared at my expense would eventually come back to them. The notebook became my anchor. Every night, after the house had gone quiet and the pain dulled enough to let me focus, I opened it and wrote. At first, it was just a messy collection of memories and details. Mia's excuses, the things my parents said, the countless times I'd been dismissed. But over time, those scribbles began to take shape. Patterns emerged. It became less about venting and more about building a map of how I'd been treated, how my life had been steered by people who cared more about appearances than about me. It was strange, but the act of writing gave me strength. I started to see beyond the fog of pain. Slowly, my body began to heal. The bruises faded, the stitches came out, and though the ache in my ribs lingered, I found myself sitting longer at the desk, reading more, researching more. I devoured books about resilience, about boundaries, even about business strategy, anything that reminded me I could rebuild from the ground up. My job had been waiting for me. I worked in IT consulting, and my manager had sent me emails while I was in recovery telling me to take all the time I needed. When I finally felt strong enough, I logged back in remotely. Within a week, I remembered who I was outside of Mia's shadow. Clients still trusted me. Colleagues respected me. And for the first time in months, I felt useful again. Not to her, not to my parents, to myself. The money I earned from returning to work became my quiet weapon. I stopped telling Mia about my paychecks or bonuses. In the past, she'd always had access, always knew what I made, always had suggestions on what we should invest in, which usually translated to things she wanted. But now I kept it close. I funneled part of it into a separate account she didn't know about, one my parents couldn't meddle with either. With each deposit, I felt a piece of independence stitch itself back into me. Meanwhile, Mia grew bolder in her carelessness. She would still visit, but less often, sometimes not even pretending to stay long. My parents would call to guilt me into being nicer to her, saying she was overwhelmed. But instead of arguing, I just nodded. I let them believe I was the one being difficult. I'd learned silence could be powerful when used the right way. Physically, I committed to recovery. The doctor had told me not to push too hard, but I started walking every day, each step a rebellion against the weakness they all assumed defined me. At first it was just a block or two, my chest tight and sore, but within weeks I was doing miles. By the end of the month, I'd lost weight, built stamina, and felt more alive than I had before the accident. Every stride reminded me that I wasn't broken. I was rebuilding. Opportunities started coming my way at work, too. Because I'd been so focused, so dedicated in those quiet nights. My reports and projects were sharper than ever. My manager noticed. A promotion was hinted at, along with a raise. For once, I didn't rush to tell Mia or my parents. I let the knowledge sit quietly inside me like a secret flame I refused to let them snuff out. And yet, despite all the growth, I kept playing my role. To Mia, I was still the recovering fiancé, grateful for the scraps of attention she threw my way. To my parents, I was still their dramatic son who needed to appreciate the woman they thought was too good for him. I didn't fight it. I let them believe it, let them stay comfortable in their favoritism, because deep down I knew the longer they underestimated me, the sweeter the eventual reckoning would be. Late one night, after finishing another long call with a client overseas, I sat back in my chair and looked at my reflection in the darkened computer screen. My face was thinner, my eyes sharper, my posture stronger. I didn't look like the man who had begged for Mia's attention in a hospital bed. I looked like someone who was learning to rise quietly, someone who was preparing for something bigger than they could see. In that reflection, I felt it again. The seed that had sprouted in the hospital was no longer just growing. It was branching out, firm and steady, its roots digging deep. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was becoming someone they wouldn't recognize until it was too late. It was around that time, when I had started to feel stronger in body and sharper in mind, that I stumbled across something that changed everything. It happened almost by accident. Mia had come over one evening, half-heartedly checking in on me, dropping off a bag of groceries as if that somehow balanced out her absence. She went straight to the kitchen, chattering about how busy she'd been with work. I'd grown used to tuning her out, nodding at the right moments while quietly studying her tone and her expressions. But that night, she left her phone on the counter when she went to the bathroom. It buzzed once, twice, then lit up with a string of messages from Mark. I shouldn't have looked. I know that. But when the screen lit up again, the preview was impossible to ignore. Don't worry. She still thinks you're just my best friend. Winky face? My blood ran cold. My ribs ached as I leaned forward, heart pounding so hard I thought it might break me again. I didn't open the phone, didn't scroll. I didn't need to. The implication was clear, and it confirmed every suspicion I'd pushed aside for months. When Mia came back, smiling like nothing was wrong, I kept my face neutral. I didn't say a word. That was when I realized the advantage I suddenly had. They thought I was blind, but now I had proof. Not just of her betrayal, but of their arrogance. They weren't even careful anymore. That arrogance could be turned against them. From that night on, I became more deliberate. I didn't confront her, didn't let on that I knew. Instead, I played the part of the recovering, dependent fiancé. I let her think I was still under her spell. That way, she didn't guard her secrets as closely. And sure enough, over time, I began piecing together her patterns. When she'd stay late at work, when she'd visit her mom, the excuses she fed my parents to keep them on her side. All of it went into the notebook, neat and detailed. Meanwhile, at work, things took an unexpected turn. My manager officially offered me a promotion, senior consultant, with a salary bump big enough to change my life. I accepted without hesitation. But here's the thing, I didn't tell anyone. Not Mia, not my parents. I kept that raise quiet, funneling the extra money into the account she didn't know existed. The longer I built that reserve, the more freedom I could feel pressing at the edges of my life. But it wasn't just financial power I was gaining. The promotion came with connections, new clients, influential people in industries I'd only brushed against before. I began to realize just how valuable my network could be. And in one of those late-night calls with a client, I learned something else. Mark's company had a contract with the very firm I now had oversight on. Not directly through me, but close enough that I could find out details if I wanted to. That discovery felt like a key turning in a lock. Mia's best friend wasn't just a personal problem anymore. He was tied to the professional world I was now rising in. It meant I could watch them without them realizing it. It meant I could position myself in ways they'd never anticipate. By day, I was the same old Jerry. Quiet, recovering, grateful for scraps of attention. By night, I was building, collecting information, growing stronger in silence. My parents kept defending Mia, blind to everything. She kept underestimating me, too busy with her double life to notice the shift in my eyes. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the calm surface I showed the world, the outlines of something sharp were forming. It wasn't just about leaving anymore. It wasn't even just about surviving. It was about making sure the people who had written me off would one day realize exactly who they'd betrayed and exactly how much it would cost them. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. It was a Tuesday evening and Mia had once again made an excuse about staying late at work. By then, I'd memorized her pattern so well I could practically predict when she'd be at Mark's place. Instead of letting the loneliness wash over me, I opened my laptop and started looking deeper into the account files I had access to at work. Mark's company name popped up in a vendor review. At first, I told myself I was only curious. But as I dug further, I saw something more interesting. Irregularities in billing, overcharges tucked into invoices, services that didn't match the records. I wasn't the one responsible for investigating, but I knew enough to recognize it wasn't clean. It was the kind of mistake that could sink a small company if it ever came under scrutiny. And it just so happened that Mark's firm wasn't large enough to survive that kind of attention. I didn't act right away. I was deliberate, patient. I gathered copies of reports, kept notes, lined everything up neatly in my notebook. It wasn't revenge yet. It was preparation. The way a chess player sets the board before the final strike. Meanwhile, Mia's behavior gave me even more leverage. She grew reckless, maybe because she thought I was too weak to care. One evening, she left her phone face up while cooking in my kitchen, and another string of messages from Mark flashed across the screen. Don't forget the weekend. Can't wait to finally be together without him hovering. My stomach turned, but outwardly I just smiled and asked if she wanted me to set the table. She had no idea I'd seen it. That was when the revenge crystallized in my mind. I wasn't just going to walk away quietly. I was going to make sure the mask she wore, so carefully crafted for my parents, for everyone, would shatter in front of them. And I would do it without raising my voice, without a single curse, without a scene. Calm, sharp, undeniable. I started small. I began politely declining when my parents asked me to be more patient with Mia. Instead, I'd say, "You're right. She deserves someone who understands her better." The first time I said it, my mom blinked in confusion, not sure whether I was being sarcastic. But I wasn't. I wanted to plant the seed in their minds that maybe I was stepping back. And as I pulled away emotionally, Mia leaned harder into her outings with Mark, giving me even more space to prepare. Then came the perfect storm. My company scheduled a quarterly review with vendors, and Mark's firm was on the list. I wasn't leading it, but I made sure I was in the room. When the questions started flying about the inconsistencies I'd quietly documented, Mark stumbled. His confidence cracked. The more the auditors pressed, the paler he became. I didn't say a word, just sat back taking quiet notes while the walls closed in around him. That night, Mia came over, distracted and tense. "Mark's having a tough time at work," she said, her tone laced with worry. She didn't know I'd been in the room. She didn't know I'd already seen the cracks forming in his world. I nodded, hiding the flicker of satisfaction in my chest. "That's tough," I said softly. "I hope he figures it out." By then, my savings account had grown fat from the promotion and overtime. I'd spoken quietly to a realtor and started looking at apartments. Places with clean walls, bright windows, spaces that didn't hold the shadows of betrayal. I wasn't ready to move yet, but knowing I could was enough to keep me steady. The last piece fell into place on a Saturday morning. Mia was in my living room scrolling through her phone while pretending to watch TV. My parents dropped by unannounced, arms full of groceries. The four of us sat together, an uncomfortable silence hanging in the air until my mom said brightly, "We're so grateful for Mia. She's been your rock through all this." I looked at Mia, then at my parents, and felt the calmest I ever had. "You're right," I said. "She's been consistent." Mia smiled, clearly taking it as a compliment. My parents nodded in approval, and that's when I leaned back and added, "So consistent, in fact, that she spends almost every evening with Mark. He must be just as much of a rock for her." The room went still. Mia froze, her phone slipping slightly from her hand. My parents exchanged confused glances, their smiles faltering. I didn't raise my voice, didn't accuse. I just let the words hang, calm and undeniable. That was only the first strike. There was more, so much more that I had prepared, lined up, waiting. And as Mia's face drained of color, as my parents struggled to reconcile what they were hearing, I knew the real unraveling was only just beginning. The silence after I dropped those words was heavy enough to suffocate the room. My mother blinked rapidly, looking between Mia and me as if waiting for one of us to laugh and say it was a joke. My father cleared his throat, trying to regain control. "Jerry, that's a serious accusation," he said firmly, but his voice faltered when Mia's face betrayed her. Cheeks flushed, eyes darting, lips pressed tight. I leaned forward, my tone steady and deliberate. "It's not an accusation. It's a fact. While I was in a hospital bed fighting to breathe, she was out with him. While you told me to be patient and stop being dramatic, she was sneaking off to spend the night with him. I didn't want to believe it, but I've had all the proof I need for months. I just wanted you to see her clearly without my voice being drowned out." Mia shot up from the couch, her hands trembling. "You don't understand. Mark and we..." She cut herself off, realizing she'd already said too much. My mom gasped, clutching her chest. My dad muttered something under his breath, his face paling as he sank back into the chair. I stayed calm, almost eerily so. "You wanted me to be patient, to be grateful, to keep quiet while she laughed at me with someone else. And I did. I let you defend her. I let you tell me I was overreacting. But now you know, and I won't let you twist this one." For once, there was no lecture, no dismissive wave of the hand. Just the sound of Mia fumbling to grab her purse, her voice cracking as she said, "You'll regret this, Jerry." She didn't wait for a response. The door slammed behind her, the echo reverberating through the house like the final crack of a whip. My parents sat frozen, their faces reflecting the realization that they had been played just as much as I had. My mother whispered, I didn't know." My father didn't speak at all. For the first time in years, I felt no urge to explain myself, no desire to seek their approval. I simply stood, ribs still aching, but posture straighter than it had ever been, and said, "That's the difference between us. I knew, and I won't ignore it anymore." In the weeks that followed, Mia tried to reach out. Texts, calls, even showing up once at my door in tears. I didn't answer. Word spread quickly about Mark's company facing an investigation. Their contract suspended, clients pulling out. I didn't need to say a word or lift a finger beyond what I had already done. His arrogance had taken care of the rest. As for me, I signed the lease on a new apartment with wide windows and clean white walls. I moved in quietly, leaving behind the house that had become a stage for betrayal. My promotion became official, the new salary hitting my private account like a confirmation that I'd chosen the right path. My parents tried awkwardly to reconcile, inviting me to dinner, asking questions they'd never cared to ask before. But the dynamic had changed forever. I wasn't angry anymore. I was simply done playing their version of family. One evening, as I sat by the window of my new place, the city lights stretching endlessly before me, I opened my notebook one last time. The pages were full, dates, notes, memories, all the evidence of everything I had endured. I flipped to the last page and wrote a single line. "They thought I wouldn't make it through the night, but I did, and they'll never forget it." Then I closed the notebook, set it on the shelf, and finally exhaled. Not as the broken man I'd been, but as someone who had risen, endured, and reclaimed his own. Now on to the next story. Story 5. My name is Rick. I'm 26 years old, and until recently, I lived in a house where silence carried more weight than words. You'd think I'd be used to it by now. The passive-aggressive sighs at dinner, the lingering looks of disappointment, the way my dad would clear his throat like he was preparing to say something important, only to mutter, "Never mind," and walk off. That was just life growing up in our house. My older brother, Evan, was the golden child, captain of the soccer team, the first in our family to get a scholarship. "Mister, we're so proud of you." Me? I was just Rick. I was the kid who liked to draw, who fixed up an old laptop from a yard sale so I could learn animation, who stayed up late editing short videos in secret because I knew if I showed anyone, they'd just laugh. I never really fit into my family. Not in the way that made them cruel on the surface, but in the quiet, cutting way where love was conditional and kindness felt like a reward system. My dad, Alan, was the kind of man who believed respect had to be earned. And apparently I hadn't, not like Evan had. Our mom passed away when I was 10, and since then, the warmth in the house had disappeared. Dad filled the void with long hours at work, and Evan filled it with achievements. I filled it with silence. I never expected praise, but I thought maybe just once they'd notice how hard I was trying. When I landed a remote job doing video editing, I was thrilled. I showed my dad one of the projects, a small indie commercial I'd worked on. He nodded absently, then asked if Evan needed help fixing his car. That was 3 years ago. He never asked about my job again. Things got worse last year. Slowly but steadily, my health took a hit. Nothing major, just recurring migraines, constant fatigue, some stuff the doctor chalked up to stress. I tried to explain it to my dad, but he looked at me like I'd confessed to being lazy. "You're always tired," he said once, shaking his head like it physically pained him. "Maybe if you did some real work, you wouldn't be." Evan started joining in around then. He'd tease me in that friendly but not really way that only siblings can get away with. "Must be nice to nap all day and call it work," he'd say with a smirk. "Bet Netflix is thrilled to have you." I laughed it off at first, thinking maybe he didn't mean it, but it chipped away at me, especially when I overheard him on the phone with one of his friends saying, "Dan, yeah, he's still living in the basement like a troll. Dad's been carrying him for years. No clue why he keeps enabling it." That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying it in my head. Carrying me. I was paying rent, groceries, the electricity bill half the time. I even covered Evan's parking tickets a few months back when he couldn't afford them. Not that he ever thanked me. Then came the day everything changed. It was a Saturday. Evan and Dad were in the garage fixing something on the truck. I was on my way out to pick up groceries. I stepped into the garage to ask if they needed anything. Dad didn't even look up. "You don't need to bother," he said. Evan snorted. "Yeah, unless they've got a sale on excuses." I blinked. What's that supposed to mean? That's when my dad turned. His expression was blank, almost cold. "It means we're tired, Rick. Tired of you moping around like a ghost. You're a grown man, and you act like a child. You're nothing but a burden." I just stood there. I wasn't even angry yet. I was stunned. The word burden rang in my ears like an alarm. Evan leaned against the workbench, arms crossed. "Let's be real, Dan. No one would miss you if you left." That was the moment. You know those seconds in life when everything clicks into place, where time slows and you suddenly see things for what they are. That was it for me. I didn't shout. I didn't throw anything or slam the door. I just nodded. "Okay," I said. That was it. Just, okay. I turned, went back inside, packed a duffel bag with essentials. Laptop, clothes, sketchbooks, charger. I left my house key on the kitchen counter. I wrote a short note that said, "Since I'm such a burden, I'll stop being one." And I left. I moved across the state that night. I had a friend from college, Liv, who'd always said I could crash if I ever needed a change. I never thought I'd take her up on it. But that night, I called her and within hours, I was on the road. I found a room in her building the next week. I started freelancing harder than ever, pulled extra gigs, found a few stable clients who valued my work. For the first time, I didn't have to prove myself to anyone. I was just me. 3 months went by, then 6. No calls, no texts, nothing. I guess I shouldn't have been surprised until this week. It was a quiet Tuesday. I just wrapped up a project and was eating lunch when my phone buzzed. A voicemail. I didn't recognize the number at first, but when I hit play, I nearly dropped my fork. "Rick, it's Dad. Listen, please come home. Things aren't... Evans." His voice cracked. "Look, I know we haven't spoken, but I need to talk to you. We need to talk. Please, just call me back." I didn't. Not yet, anyway, because the moment I heard that message, My heart didn't race with guilt or relief. It clenched with something deeper, something sharper. Not anger, not sadness, just clarity. They only reached out when they needed something. And the truth is, I wasn't sure if I wanted to hear what it was. Not yet, but I had a feeling I was about to find out. I stared at my phone for a long time after that voicemail. The lunch I'd been eating went cold. My mind wasn't racing. It was quiet. Too quiet. Like when you wake up from a bad dream and everything is just still. I played the message again and again, listening for something, anything that sounded like an apology. But it wasn't there. Just panic, desperation. Not even my name spoken with softness. Just Rick. Sharp, stiff, unfamiliar. I didn't call him back. That same night, Liv noticed I was off. We were watching some old animated film I used to love as a kid, comfort food for the soul, and she glanced over, saw the look on my face, and hit pause. What's going on? I told her. Not everything, just the voicemail. Her expression didn't change much, just a little crease in her brow. The same one she always got when something was bothering her. You thinking of going back? I don't know, I said, but I did. I just didn't want to say it out loud. Liv didn't push. She never did. That was the thing about her. She had this calm about her, like she could feel the storm in other people without trying to fix it. She just stayed beside you until the storm passed. Whatever you decide, she said, just make sure it's not out of guilt. You don't owe them your pain, Dan. I nodded, but I didn't sleep that night. My brain wouldn't shut off. I kept wondering what Evan had done. Evans? That pause in Dad's voice. Had something happened? Was he in trouble? Was he sick? Or was it something else? 2 days passed. I went about my work. I met deadlines. I edited projects. I made small talk. But I kept checking my phone. One voicemail, no follow-up. Then Thursday evening came and I got a text from my cousin Julie. It simply said, "Hey, I know this is random, but are you okay? I saw something weird on Facebook that set me off." I called her right away. Julie picked up immediately. "Rick? Oh my God. I wasn't sure you'd answer. Listen, I don't want to stir anything, but your dad made a post on Facebook earlier today. It's been deleted now, but I saw it. It was just one line. Family shouldn't wait until it's too late to fix things." My mouth went dry. "What's going on with Evan?" Julie hesitated. "I don't know everything, but from what my mom said, there was some kind of incident at his job. Something bad. Apparently, he was fired last week after a huge argument with his boss. There's rumors he was caught lying on some reports, trying to blame it on someone else. It got ugly. That tracked. Evan had always been smooth-talking, always able to weasel out of trouble, but I never thought he'd go that far. I thanked her for letting me know and hung up. My stomach was in knots. Not because Evan had lost his job, but because I knew what was happening. I'd seen this pattern before. When things fell apart for Evan, Dad swooped in. He defended him. He protected him. And when that wasn't enough, he looked for someone to blame or someone to save them. And now that someone was me. The next morning, I got another voicemail. This time from a different number, shorter, clipped. "Rick, it's Evan. I know I said some stuff I shouldn't have. Can we just talk, please?" No apology, just a softening of tone. Like if he sounded sorry, maybe I wouldn't notice that he wasn't actually saying sorry. I didn't respond. Instead, I went for a walk. It was cloudy, cool, the kind of weather that makes you think too much. I found a bench by the river and sat there for an hour just watching the water. And I started to remember things. Like how when we were kids, Evan used to hide my sketchbooks and tell me it was for my own good. So you'll stop embarrassing yourself. How Dad refused to come to the student showcase when I won a small local award for an animation short. Said he had work, then later admitted he just didn't think it was that important. How I once offered to help Evan with a video presentation for his college course. Spent 3 nights editing it for him, and he turned it in, without crediting me. And when I asked why, he just shrugged and said, "You're good at being invisible." I think part of me always hoped they'd come around. That if I kept proving myself, one day I'd finally be enough. But now it wasn't just about being enough. It was about whether I wanted them to be part of my life at all. That weekend I got a letter in the mail. A real letter, handwritten. The return address was home. Inside it was just a single page. My dad's handwriting, neat, precise. Rick, I don't know how to fix what I said. I don't even know if it can be fixed. I just know I was wrong about you. About everything. I said things I can't take back. And Evan, he's lost right now. I am too. We both are. I'm not asking you to come back. I'm just asking you not to disappear completely. You were never a burden. I was, Dad. It should have hit me harder than it did. I stared at the letter for a long time. Then I folded it back up, slid it into the envelope, and tucked it away in a drawer. That night, I opened up a blank document and started writing. Not a message to him, not a reply, just words. My story, my version. What it felt like to grow up feeling like a shadow. What it meant to walk away without burning everything down. What it meant to finally breathe. And as I wrote, I realized I wasn't writing it for them. I was writing it for me. Because sometimes the only way to find peace isn't to go back. It's to move forward. And I had a feeling I was just getting started. But then 2 days later, something happened that changed everything. I got another voicemail. Only this time it wasn't from my dad or Evan. It was from my childhood neighbor, Mrs. Patel. And her message, Rick, I think you need to come home. There's something you don't know. I froze, because the tone in her voice wasn't desperate. It wasn't manipulative. It was scared. And that's when I knew this wasn't over. I must have replayed that voicemail at least a dozen times. Mrs. Patel had always been a kind soul. Quiet, gentle. Never one to exaggerate or gossip. When we were kids, she used to bring over tins of her homemade almond cookies every Christmas. Even after Mom passed, she kept doing it. Just left them at the door with a note. No fuss, no expectations. So hearing her voice laced with fear, that got under my skin in a way my father's apology never could. I called her back immediately, hands clammy, my heart already bracing for something I couldn't name. She picked up after one ring. Rick, she said. Thank God. Her voice was hushed, like she didn't want anyone to hear. I'm here, I said quickly. What's going on? Are you okay? I'm fine, dear. It's not me, she said, pausing like she was trying to figure out how to say something she really didn't want to say. It's your father and Evan. They've done something and I didn't want to be the one to tell you, but I think you deserve to know before they try to pull you into it. I leaned forward, voice tense. What did they do? She hesitated. There was a man here yesterday, some kind of investigator. He knocked on my door asking questions about your dad. About financial records, property lines. I didn't tell him much. But Rick, your name came up. My name. My mouth went dry. In what way? They think your father may have taken out loans, she said carefully. Loans against the house, against some assets that, well, that weren't his alone to leverage. I didn't respond at first. I felt like I'd been dunked in ice water. She continued, her voice full of apology. They think he forged your name, maybe on a cosign. I don't know all the details. But the man said you might be legally liable if you don't act quickly. That's why I called. You need to check immediately. I thanked her repeatedly and hung up, my hands shaking as I opened my laptop. I pulled up my credit report, and what I saw made my stomach twist. There it was. A personal loan in my name, $35,000. Opened 6 months ago. Address listed, my father's. Cosigner, none. Signature, mine. Except it wasn't. It looked like mine, close enough to fool a bank, but I knew my own hand. This was not my signature. My mind reeled. I scrolled further. A second entry. A line of credit attached to a small business account. Again, my name. A fake signature. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen like it would rearrange itself into something less damning. But it didn't. And slowly, coldly, the pieces began to fit together. Dad had panicked when Evan lost his job. The golden boy, the family legacy, the one who was supposed to carry the name forward. But Evan was drowning, and Dad was willing to do anything to keep him afloat, even if it meant dragging me down with them. I wanted to scream, to drive back home and bang on the door and demand answers, but I didn't. I sat in silence, every breath like broken glass in my throat. They didn't want me back because they missed me. They wanted me back to clean up their mess, to take the fall, to be useful for once. Suddenly, all those messages, those calls, that letter, they weren't acts of remorse. They were calculated, strategic, desperate, sure, but not in a way that meant love. In a way that meant survival. And I was the life raft. I closed the laptop slowly. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just sat there numb until I picked up my phone and called someone I hadn't spoken to in years. His name was Jordan. He used to be my roommate in college, a law student who later became an attorney specializing in financial fraud. We hadn't talked since graduation, not really, but I still had his number. I texted him, "Hey, it's Rick. I need your help. It's urgent." He called back 5 minutes later. By the end of the hour, I had a plan. Jordan told me exactly what to do. How to file a fraud report, how to notify the bank and lock down my credit, how to request the original application documents and have them flagged for investigation, how to protect myself legally. Fast. It wasn't going to be easy. It wouldn't be quick. But I wasn't helpless. And this time, I wasn't going to stay silent. The next morning, I did something I never thought I'd do. I drove back home, not to stay, not to talk, to confront. I parked across the street from the house I'd once called mine. It looked the same yet different. Smaller, sadder. The lawn was overgrown. The shutters crooked. There was an oil stain on the driveway that hadn't been there before. I walked up to the door and knocked once. Evan opened it. His face froze. "Dan." I didn't smile. "Where's Dad?" He blinked, clearly trying to read my expression, then stepped aside. Inside, I stepped through the threshold into the living room where nothing had changed. Same faded recliner, same broken lamp with the crooked shade, same scent of dust and regret. Dad was sitting at the kitchen table, flipping through a pile of envelopes. When he looked up and saw me, his eyes widened. "Rick, you came." I dropped a folder onto the table. His smile faltered. "What's this?" I leaned in, my voice cold. "That's the paperwork for the loans you took out in my name." He paled. Evan stiffened behind me. I continued. "I know everything. I know about the forgery, the fraud. I've already contacted the banks, filed the reports, pulled my credit. You dragged me into your mess without even asking. You used me." Dad opened his mouth, but no words came out. I shook my head. "And now you're going to face the consequences." And then, before either of them could speak, my phone buzzed. A text from Jordan. It said, "The bank just confirmed they're launching an investigation. They want to speak to you directly and they're opening a criminal case." I showed them the message, and for the first time in my life I watched my father break. His face crumpled, not with sorrow, but with fear. Pure, undeniable fear. Evan stepped back, eyes darting. "You wouldn't actually press charges, would you?" I looked him straight in the eyes and said, "Watch me." I walked out of that house with my head held high for the first time in years. The sun was starting to set, casting long shadows across the driveway. As I stepped back into my car, my hands trembled. Not from fear, but from adrenaline. That confrontation had been building inside me for years, bubbling beneath the surface every time I'd been dismissed, ignored, or made to feel like I didn't matter. Now I had finally stood up for myself. I didn't even look back at the house as I pulled away. Let them sit in it. The silence, the weight of their actions, the panic of consequences coming their way. For once, it wasn't my problem to fix. I'd done nothing wrong. I wasn't the disappointment. I wasn't the burden. I was the one they thought they could use because I had always kept the peace. But not anymore. By the time I got back to my apartment, I had 2 voicemails waiting. One was from my father. He didn't cry, but his voice shook. "Rick, please don't do this. I messed up." Okay. Panicked. Evan was spiraling. I didn't know what else to do. You weren't here and he needed help. I thought I'd figure it out before it caught up with us. "Please, we're still family. We can fix this." The second was from Evan. His tone was sharper. "Seriously, Dan, you're gonna throw us under the bus like that after everything we've done for you? You wouldn't have a job if Dad hadn't let you freeload for so long. Don't act like some kind of victim. This is just making things worse for everyone." That voicemail made me angry. Everything they've done for me, the sheer audacity, the revisionist memory, the twisting of truth to make me the villain in their story. I didn't respond to either of them. Not out of pettiness, but because I didn't need to. My energy wasn't going toward their redemption arc anymore. It was going toward rebuilding what they tried to destroy. My life. Over the next few weeks, things moved fast. Jordan helped me coordinate everything. He connected me with a financial investigator and a legal team that specialized in identity fraud. They immediately took action to protect me, freezing the fraudulent accounts, subpoenaing the original loan applications, flagging every signature for forensic review. The forensic analysis proved what I already knew. The signatures weren't mine. The pen pressure, slant, and stroke patterns were off, subtly but unmistakably. The banks, once presented with the evidence and my sworn statement, began reversing the charges and removing the loans from my record. It was a process, slow, tedious, but one that steadily untangled me from the financial noose my father had tried to place around my neck. A few weeks later, I received a formal letter from the county clerk's office. The local authorities were moving forward with charges. Bank fraud, identity theft, forgery. It wasn't just about the loans anymore. It was about intent, pattern, misuse of trust. I sat with the letter for a long time. Holding it felt surreal, like I was finally holding proof that I wasn't crazy, that everything I'd endured wasn't just family drama or a misunderstanding. It was a crime, and I had every right to see justice carried out. Liv was the first to hug me when I told her the news. "This is big, Dan," she said. "This is your closure." But it was also more than that. It was a line in the sand. The trial didn't happen overnight, of course. The investigation took several months. But when the day finally came, I sat in that courtroom. Clean-shaven, calm, dressed in a suit that fit better than anything I'd worn at home. I watched my father, once so tall and rigid, now hunched in a courtroom chair. I sunk in, hands trembling. Evan was there, too, fidgeting, angry, still defiant. I didn't speak to them. Not once. When I took the stand, I told the truth. No embellishments, no dramatics. Just the truth. I spoke about the years of neglect, the slow erosion of self-worth, the constant dismissal, and finally the betrayal. How they used my name, my credit, my trust to dig themselves out of a hole they had made. The judge listened carefully. In the end, the court ruled in my favor. The loans were declared fraudulent. My record was cleared. My father was sentenced to 2 years of probation, 200 hours of community service, and mandatory financial counseling. Given his age, the court showed leniency, but he would carry the fraud conviction with him for the rest of his life. Evan wasn't charged, but the bank blacklisted him and his professional license was revoked. Whatever career he thought he still had, gone. His reputation shattered. And me? I walked out of that courtroom free. Not just legally, emotionally, spiritually. Free in a way I hadn't felt in years. I never went back to that house. After the trial, it was foreclosed. Turns out the debts were deeper than I realized. I found out from Julie that my father had quietly moved in with a distant cousin on the other side of the state. Evan was couch surfing and apparently trying to start a podcast. I didn't listen. I didn't need to, because my life had finally moved on. I moved into a better apartment, one with a little balcony and a skylight in the bedroom. My client list grew. A small creative agency hired me as their full-time editor. I got promoted 6 months later. I even began teaching an online course for aspiring video editors, sharing the same tools and tricks I once had to learn in silence. I made friends, real ones, people who didn't just tolerate me. They saw me. I built a life I was proud of, one not defined by guilt or obligation or shame. One morning about a year after the trial, I got a small package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a worn photograph. Me at 10 years old, sitting on the living room floor with my sketchbook, smiling as my mother leaned over me, watching me draw. Taped to the back was a note in familiar handwriting. "I'm sorry I forgot who you were. I wish she'd been here. She would have stopped me. Dad." I stared at the photo for a long time. Then I put it in a box and stored it away because that part of my story, it was over. Now, when people ask me about my family, I tell them the truth, but I don't dwell on it. I don't lead with the pain. I lead with what I learned. About strength, about boundaries, about choosing yourself even when it hurts, about how silence can be survival but speaking up can be freedom. And when I walk past a mirror now, I don't see the burden they used to call me. I see a man who survived them and became more. Now on to the next story. Story 6. After my emergency C-section, I texted, "I can't do this alone. Please help." Silence. The next morning, my sister posted on Facebook, "Family Bonding Day." 3 weeks later, still weak and barely walking. My phone lit up with 47 missed calls and a message from Dad. "Send $4,800 or else." I looked down at my baby and responded. I was still numb from the waist down when they wheeled me out of the operating room. It was all surreal. The lights, the whispers, the faint cries echoing from nearby delivery rooms. I had imagined it so differently. Me holding my baby with shaky hands but a full heart, maybe even crying tears of joy. Instead, there was just this overwhelming emptiness. I stared up at the ceiling tiles, half listening to the nurse say something about a successful procedure. They'd taken my daughter to the NICU for monitoring. I couldn't even see her yet. I was alone. No one had come. Not my mother, not my sister, not even a cousin, and definitely not him. The baby's father had walked out when I was 7 months pregnant. No fight, no final straw. Just one night he said he needed time to think and never came back. I sent one message a week later asking if he was okay, and he replied, "Yeah," and nothing else. That was the last I heard from him. In the days leading up to the birth, I tried to convince myself it didn't matter. I'd be strong. I'd do it without him. I didn't need anyone. But when they said I needed an emergency C-section and started prepping me in record time, I realized how much I had been lying to myself. After the surgery, alone in recovery, shaking, I picked up my phone and typed out the most honest thing I had said in months. "I can't do this alone. Please help." I sent it to my mom, my sister, and even my dad, who I hadn't spoken to in almost a year. I didn't care about the history. I just needed someone to show up. I stared at the screen, waiting for that buzz, that ding, that anything. But nothing came. My battery died in the middle of the night. When a nurse brought me a charger the next morning, I turned the phone on immediately. Still nothing. No missed calls, no unread messages, just a Facebook notification. I opened it. It was a tagged photo. My sister had posted a group selfie at some winery with the caption, "Family Bonding Day. Brunch and wine with my favorites." Clinking glasses, 2 hearts. It was like a punch to the chest. She had seen the message. I know she had. The message even showed me the read receipt. I stared at the post for a long time, not knowing what I felt more, rage or shame. I didn't reply to her. I didn't reply to anyone. Not after that. 3 days later, I was discharged. Still hurting, barely able to walk upright, but I made it home. Just me and my baby girl. No one came to visit. No balloons, no casseroles, no stupid diaper cake. I had food delivered when I could afford it and managed to get the neighbor kid to help me carry groceries up the stairs once. I told him I'd pay him $10 if he didn't tell anyone. I cried in the hallway afterward. 3 weeks passed like that. Bleeding, leaking, hurting, feeding the baby on 2 hours of sleep at a time, taking sponge baths when I could. Still no calls, no messages. Just complete silence until that morning. I was holding my daughter. She had finally fallen asleep after crying for an hour when my phone started buzzing so hard it nearly slipped off the armrest. 47 missed calls. I blinked, thought maybe it was a mistake. Then the message came from my dad. "Send $4,800 or else." That was it. No hello. No how's the baby. No we're worried. Just a demand. My heart pounded so hard I thought I might throw up. I stared at the message. Reread it 5 times. Then I opened the call log. It was real. 47 calls from my parents and sister in the span of an hour. I wrote back one word. No. No punctuation. No explanation. I didn't owe them one. I didn't know what the or else meant. I didn't care. Something in me cracked that day. Clean and final. But that wasn't the end. Not even close. It was just the beginning. The reply I got wasn't a message. It was a knock. 2 mornings after I'd said no, I was sitting on the couch holding my daughter against my chest, still in the same oversized hoodie I'd been sleeping in all week, when the pounding started. Not knocking. Full-on fists slamming against the door like someone was trying to break it down. My stomach dropped. I froze. My daughter stirred, then started crying again like she felt the tension. 2. I shuffled over, still healing, still sore, and peeked through the peephole. I stood there stunned for a second. My parents, both of them. I hadn't seen either of them in nearly a year, not even during the pregnancy. My mom had made it clear she didn't understand my decision to keep the baby after the father left. My dad hadn't really said anything, he just disappeared, and now they were here. I opened the door because they weren't going to leave quietly. They brushed right past me like they lived there. My mom gave the place one long judgmental sweep. My dad walked straight into the kitchen and opened the fridge. No, hello. No, how are you? No, can we see the baby? Then they started talking like we were already in the middle of a conversation. They needed money. My sister's wedding was happening sooner than expected. Her boyfriend, fiancé now apparently, had messed something up financially and they were short. Really short. The venue had called. The photographer was about to cancel. The dress deposit was due and they needed help. They didn't ask. They expected. When I said nothing, my mom turned it up, that I was being cold, that family helps family, that I was holding a grudge over nothing, that just because I had a baby didn't mean I got to ignore my responsibilities to the rest of them. I asked where any of them had been 3 weeks ago when I needed help, when I was begging. My dad said I should have just handled it quietly like an adult. My hands were shaking. Then came the guilt trip. That I didn't understand how hard things had been for my sister. That she was trying so hard to make things work with her fiancé even though he was going through a tough time. A rough patch. That's what they were calling it. The man was drunk at Thanksgiving last year and punched a hole in their hallway wall because someone said his mashed potatoes were dry. But sure, let's call it a rough patch. I said no again. That's when it got loud. My mom raised her voice. My dad accused me of playing the victim. My baby, who had finally fallen asleep just minutes before, woke up screaming. They didn't even flinch. I picked her up, said nothing, just held her and walked to the door. I opened it wide. Neither of them moved for a minute. Then finally, they stepped out, still muttering, still acting like I owed them something. My dad said I'd regret this. My mom told me not to expect anyone to be there for me when things really fall apart. I closed the door behind them and locked it. I didn't cry this time. I was too tired. Later that night, I found myself scrolling through my contacts. I stopped on a name I hadn't pressed in almost a year. Noah. He had been there for everything once. Before the pregnancy, before the breakup, he was the kind of friend who always checked in even when we drifted. When I was still with my ex, Noah kept his distance. But when the guy left, he'd sent me a simple text. I'm here if you need anything. I never answered. I sent him a photo of the baby. No caption, no explanation, just her. He responded almost immediately. She's perfect. Are you okay? I stared at that message for a long time. Then I typed, I need help. I didn't even know what I meant by that yet, but I knew I meant it. And for the first time in weeks, I wasn't alone. Noah showed up the next morning without me asking. He just texted, I'm outside. No pressure. I stood at the door for a moment before opening it. Part of me wasn't sure how I looked. Another part of me didn't care anymore. He had 2 bags, groceries in one, baby things in the other. I noticed he'd even brought extra formula, even though I hadn't told him I was supplementing yet. The way he walked in was careful, not slow or dramatic, just respectful. He didn't treat the place like it was some sad story. He didn't make weird comments about the smell of the apartment or how tired I looked. He just took off his shoes and asked if I wanted tea or coffee. That first day, he didn't even bring up my family. We just sat there. I fed the baby while he washed some dishes I'd left in the sink. Later, he asked if I had eaten. I hadn't. I didn't even realize it. He made pasta with butter and garlic, nothing fancy, and we ate in silence. The baby lay between us in her bassinet, fidgeting. At one point, Noah leaned over and gently moved her little hand off her face. I caught myself watching him too long. That night after he left, I finally checked my phone. 32 unread messages. Most of them from my mother, a few from my sister, 2 from numbers I didn't recognize, probably my dad. They weren't even pretending anymore. My mom had sent photos of my sister crying in her wedding dress. Said I was destroying her special day. Said a decent person would help even after everything. Then came another message. We're going to have to do something drastic. I don't want it to come to that. I didn't reply. The next day, I found a folded-up note taped to my door when I came back in from checking the mailbox. It was written in black Sharpie on lined paper. Family doesn't abandon each other. You're not as unreachable as you think. You'll see. Called Noah. I didn't mean to. I just panicked. I don't even remember what I said. He showed up within 20 minutes. When I handed him the note, he didn't even sit down. He took photos of it with his phone, grabbed a notepad from his bag, and started writing down dates, times, and every incident I mentioned. He asked if I had screenshots. I said yes, I had everything. I'm going to talk to someone I know, he said. This is crossing into legal territory. He meant it. He wasn't just saying it to comfort me. But it didn't stop. Later that week, someone tried to unlock my door. I was home. Noah was over. Actually, it was one of the only nights he stayed late helping me organize the baby's things. We heard the rattle of keys, then a quiet curse. By the time Noah got to the door and flung it open, no one was there. Just the sound of someone hurrying down the stairwell. We didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I found an envelope slid under the door. Inside was a crumpled printout of a payment plan from a wedding coordinator's website. Someone had circled the total, for $1,800, and written underneath, "You don't get to pretend you're not part of this family." I handed it to Noah. He didn't even blink. He just pulled out his phone and started dialing. I asked who he was calling. He said, "A friend in law enforcement. We're done playing nice." And I realized then I hadn't felt safe in weeks. Maybe months. Maybe ever. In some way I hadn't even understood. But suddenly, with Noah handling it, I did. I knew this wasn't over, but something had changed. For once, I wasn't the one who had to hold the line. After Noah filed the police report, I thought that might be the peak. I thought maybe, just maybe, the threat of law enforcement would be enough to make them back off. I let myself believe in that quiet for about 2 days. I even slept without checking the locks 4 times before bed. Then the mail came. It was just a regular envelope, no markings, no return address, nothing that would have stood out in a stack of bills and baby formula coupons. But the weight of it felt wrong. Heavy, flat, and silent. Inside was a typed letter addressed to me. Full name, middle included. If you refuse to help your sister on the most important day of her life, don't expect to be part of the next one. We've made arrangements to visit. No name at the bottom. No threat that spelled itself out completely. But underneath it was something worse. Printed directions to my apartment building pulled from a county assessor's office. Not Google Maps, not Waze, government property listings. And then a photo. It was grainy, taken from across the street at night, but it was clear enough. My living room window. My curtains were half drawn. The light was on. The shape of the bassinet could just barely be made out if you looked hard enough. Someone had been outside watching. I called Noah, trying to keep my voice steady, but my hand was shaking so hard I dropped the phone halfway through the call. He was there within 20 minutes. He looked at the letter, the photo, and the envelope. He said nothing at first, just scanned it all carefully, then went back outside to make a phone call I didn't ask questions about. When he came back inside, his face had changed. "You're not staying here tonight." I said I couldn't just leave. I had everything here, diapers, clothes, bottles, but he already had a bag packed for me and a car seat ready in his back seat. He told me to grab what I needed and that we'd come back for the rest later. He wasn't asking, so we left. His place wasn't big, but it was clean, quiet, and warm. He set the guest room up with a portable crib he borrowed from his sister, laid out clean blankets, and even had a noise machine playing ocean sounds. I didn't ask where he got it. That night, I laid in bed listening to my daughter breathe beside me and realized something I hadn't let myself feel in weeks. I wasn't terrified. The next morning, I got a notification from my bank. There had been 3 failed login attempts on my account overnight, all from an unrecognized device. I froze. I hadn't used public Wi-Fi, I hadn't shared passwords. But then I remembered months ago, before everything exploded, I had logged into my bank account on my mom's tablet. She asked to use my phone, said hers died. I needed to transfer rent money that day. I didn't log out. I showed Noah. He didn't say anything right away. He just looked at the screen, then grabbed his phone again. By noon, the police had updated the report to include attempted access of personal financial information. Noah insisted they also look into my lease being accessed and the mail. And then he did something I didn't expect. He asked if I'd consider breaking my lease. Not just for now, he said, but permanently. Move in with me. I laughed. I genuinely thought he was joking. But he just looked at me, serious. This isn't temporary, Scarlett. This isn't going to stop. You need to be somewhere they can't reach you. Somewhere safe. I've got space. I've got room for both of you. It was sudden. Too fast, but not wrong. He wasn't just offering shelter. He was offering protection, safety, and stability, not just for me, but for my daughter, too. I didn't say yes then, but I didn't say no either. The decision came later that night. We were sitting in his living room, both of us tired, the baby finally sleeping. And then a message came through to Noah's phone, not mine. A photo of his truck, parked outside his place, taken from a car, from someone sitting and watching. The message said, "You can hide her, but not forever." Noah looked at me and didn't say a word. He picked up his keys, went outside, and called someone. 10 minutes later, he came back in, locked the door and said, "That was it. I'm handling this. You're not dealing with them again." I didn't ask what he meant by handling. I just nodded. And then I told him, "Okay, I'll move in." That's when everything really changed. We moved everything out in one trip. Noah had called in a favor with a friend who had a van, and we loaded my entire life, what was left of it anyway, into the back in under 2 hours. No goodbyes, no second thoughts. Just bags, boxes, baby gear, and silence. I didn't even tell the landlord I was leaving in person. Noah handled the lease break, paid the penalty up front without blinking, and told me to consider it a gift I didn't need to return. "This is about your safety, not debt," he said. The first night sleeping at Noah's house felt like a deep breath after weeks of drowning. It wasn't fancy, just a small guest room with white walls and a lamp that buzzed slightly. But it was quiet, warm, and safe. He had set up the baby's things already. I hadn't asked him to, he just did it. The crib was assembled. A new pack of diapers was in the closet. There were even baby wipes and burp cloths folded on the dresser. Noah never said, "This is your new home." He didn't have to. But of course, my family couldn't let that happen. The first message came through to my old email. A guilt trip disguised as concern. "You've changed. You're not thinking clearly. Don't let him isolate you from us. We're your blood." Then came the call to Noah's work. My dad somehow got the company number. Claimed that Noah was harboring a mentally unstable woman who ran off with his grandchild. Said there were legal matters to be resolved and threatened to show up if the issue wasn't handled. Noah didn't just brush it off. He didn't even wait until the end of the workday. He came home early, jaw clenched, holding his phone like it had just personally insulted him. He called the officer we'd spoken to before, updated the report, and then told me we were going to the station together. This time, we sat down with someone from the domestic crimes unit, a woman. She was calm, sharp-eyed, and didn't waste time with small talk. We gave her everything, the letters, the screenshots, the voicemail from my sister that I had saved on a backup file just in case. The one where she'd said, "Don't forget he's my dad, and I will get what I'm owed. One way or another." When the officer finished reading through the packet Noah had assembled, she leaned back in her chair and said, "They're escalating. You did the right thing coming here." She walked us through the next steps. Restraining orders, documentation, even how to make sure my name was removed from searchable online databases. And then she looked directly at me and said something that made my throat tighten. "They'll try again, but this time it's you who has the power." I didn't cry. I think I was past that now. When we left the station, Noah didn't drive home. Instead, he took a long turn and stopped at a tiny diner just outside town. We hadn't eaten all day. We sat in a booth by the window while the baby slept in her car seat on the seat beside me. He ordered for both of us without asking. And then, like it was the most casual thing in the world, he said, "I'm not just doing this because I'm your friend." I looked at him. He kept his eyes on the window, then finally added, "You and her, you're not a burden to me. I want you here for real." I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. Later that night, when we got home, he helped me settle the baby in. Then, before he turned in for the night, he checked all the doors twice. And I noticed something taped to the fridge. A calendar. My name was written on the date for 2 weeks from now in small, neat letters. Court filing RO plus security upgrade. He wasn't just offering me a place to stay. He was building a wall. One they couldn't break. And he was already preparing to stand in front of it. 2 weeks later, Noah and I stood quietly in the back of the courtroom, watching the judge flip through page after page of everything we'd brought. Messages, threats, that photo of my window, the voicemail from my sister, even the attempt to break into my bank account. The judge didn't ask many questions. He barely looked up when he granted the restraining order. It was that straightforward. My family hadn't shown up, not even to defend themselves. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated, but mostly I just felt numb. I wasn't walking out of there a winner. I was walking out of there finally free. Noah didn't say much on the drive home. He just kept checking the rearview mirror like he wasn't taking any chances. My daughter slept in the back seat, her tiny hand wrapped in the edge of a blanket. When we got back, I found a handwritten sticky note taped to the fridge. Noah had written it earlier that day before we left for court. "Today, we get peace for good." He didn't even mention it. He just let me find it when I was putting groceries away later. That's the kind of person he was. Quiet, steady, thoughtful in ways I hadn't realized until I needed someone like him more than I knew. We didn't celebrate with champagne or takeout. There wasn't a dramatic kiss or some movie moment, but we did sit out on the porch that night. My daughter was asleep in her crib, and the baby monitor buzzed softly on the table between us. The air was warm, the kind of early summer night that feels too still. Noah had grilled dinner, just burgers and corn, nothing fancy. He said, "I don't miss who you were before all this." I turned toward him, surprised. "I mean it," he said. "You were always great, but now you're something else. Stronger, calmer, like you know exactly what you won't put up with anymore." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He was right. A few weeks later, we made it official. I stopped calling it his house. We shared the bills, the chores, the late-night feedings. Somewhere in all of that, we became something more than roommates or friends. One night, I caught him asleep on the couch with my daughter on his chest, both of them breathing in sync. I stood there for a minute watching them, and something clicked in a way it never had before. That's when I realized I was in love with him. Not just grateful, not just relieved, in love. I told him 2 nights later while we were folding laundry. It wasn't dramatic. I just said it. He looked up, didn't even blink, and said, "I've been waiting to hear that for a long time." That was it. No fireworks, just peace. We moved the crib into the master bedroom. We talked about turning the guest room into a playroom. The days became simple in the best way. No more blocked numbers. No more threats. No more looking over my shoulder in grocery store parking lots. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that my sister did end up having her wedding backyard, cheap decorations. Everyone said she looked miserable. A month later, her husband got drunk and pawned some of our dad's jewelry. My dad kicked him out. Divorce papers were filed the next week. No one's called me since. They don't know where I live. They don't have my number. I deleted my social media months ago. Sometimes I wonder if I was too harsh, if cutting them off completely was too permanent. But then I remember that photo, the one they took from outside my window. I remember the envelope with directions to my apartment. The note that said, "You're not as unreachable as you think." I didn't disappear. I built a new life where they couldn't follow. Now I wake up in a home where I'm wanted, where my daughter is safe, where love is quiet and constant, where I'm not surviving. I'm actually living, and they'll never know where to find me. 2 months passed. The house felt like home now. Not temporary, not a safe place to hide, home. My daughter started sleeping through most nights, giggling at her reflection, holding on to Noah's fingers like she'd known him her whole life. There were days I almost forgot what we'd been through. Almost. Then my old phone buzzed. I hadn't turned it on in weeks, but I needed to access an old two-factor code for my taxes. And as soon as the screen lit up, the missed messages rolled in. 24 voicemails, 43 unread texts. The most recent was just a few days old. All from my parents. They wanted to talk. Not about the past, they said, just to clear the air. My mom even offered to meet in a safe, neutral place. She claimed my sister had matured and wanted to apologize. Said they weren't after money. Said they just wanted peace in the family again. I stared at those words for a long time. Noah saw my face when I put the phone down and didn't even ask. Just said, "If you want me there, I'll come." I didn't tell him yes. I didn't tell him no either. 3 days later, I agreed to meet them at a public cafe downtown. Bright, crowded, no corners to hide in. I told them I'd come alone, but I didn't say Noah would be parked across the street the entire time. They were already sitting when I arrived. My mom stood halfway up like she expected me to hug her. I didn't. My sister looked like she hadn't slept, and my dad gave me a forced smile like we were strangers at a funeral. I sat down and said it before they could even start. I don't owe you anything. Not time, not forgiveness, not money, not presents. My mom blinked like I'd slapped her. My sister tried to jump in, said she never wanted things to get so weird. She said she had no idea how hurtful her messages were. She claimed she was just under stress with the wedding. My dad stayed quiet until I looked him in the eye and asked him one question. "Was it your idea to take that photo of my window?" He didn't answer, so I kept going. "You showed me who you all were when I needed you most. That won't ever leave me. I'm not here for closure. I'm here to say this. Don't contact me again. I don't trust you. I don't want anything from you. I'm not angry anymore, but I'm done." My mom tried to act surprised, like she was heartbroken. Said they just wanted to know their granddaughter. I shook my head. She has a family. She has someone who shows up. I stood up, told them not to follow me, and walked out. Noah was waiting across the street in the car, just like we planned. I didn't say anything when I got in, just buckled my seatbelt and looked out the window. "They say anything worth repeating?" he asked. "No," I said. "They never will. That was 2 weeks ago. No new messages, no letters, no surprise appearances. I don't know if they finally understood or if they're just regrouping, but I made my decision. That chapter of my life is closed, and I don't plan on reading it again." Now on to the next story. Story 7. On my promotion day, my sister sent a thank you selfie from a resort I didn't book. Turns out, I did $3,200 on my card. I didn't confront her. I opened the app, hit dispute all, froze the card, and called the resort. At check-in, the staff asked for new payment. She texted, "What's going on?" I replied, "Wait for a call from my lawyer." On the day I finally got promoted, my sister sent me a selfie from a luxury beach resort I'd never been to, but apparently had just paid for. She was smiling with that fake influencer energy she always turned on when she knew she was getting something for free. White robe, cocktail with one of those paper umbrellas, and a palm tree perfectly centered in the background like she planned the whole thing. The caption underneath said, "Thanks for the treat. Big bro love you." My blood went cold. I hadn't spoken to her in over a week, not beyond the occasional dry, "How are you?" text. No talk of vacations, no requests, no hints, just the usual quiet, which with her usually meant trouble was about to show up wearing my name. I opened my banking app. I didn't even feel surprised at this point. $3,218.64 charged to my card that morning. Name of the transaction: Clearwater Paradise Resort. Room with ocean view. Spa package. Room service. 2 nights. Valet. The works. I stared at it for a while. Then I put my phone down and laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was insane. Because every time I thought she'd hit her ceiling, she found another floor to crash through. She'd done stuff like this before, just never on this scale. I once found a $78 Uber ride she took across the city to go to some concert. Then there was the $190 Amazon order she swore was an accident. Oh, and that hair appointment she booked using my info for some Mother's Day surprise she claimed was for both of us. And each time, the same thing. She'd deny it, get caught, cry, and my parents would beg me to be understanding. She's your sister. She's going through a hard time. It's not like she stole a car. But this time, it was a car. A $3,200 getaway car with a king-size bed and ocean view. I didn't call her. I didn't ask why. I didn't want to hear her voice twisting the story into something pitiful. I opened the credit card app and hit dispute all. Then I froze the card. Then I called the resort. She had just checked in. The guy on the phone said the payment hadn't gone through after the freeze. I asked what happens next. He said they'd ask for a new card at the front desk. I said, perfect. And I hung up. 15 minutes later, my phone buzzed. First a call, then a text. What's going on? The card isn't working. I replied, wait for a call from my lawyer. That was it. That was the moment something in me just shut off. Years of letting things slide, of biting my tongue for the sake of keeping the peace, of letting my parents convince me she'd grow out of it. She wasn't growing out of anything. She was getting better at it. And this time, I wasn't cleaning up after her. The next morning, I took a sick day and sat across from a lawyer named Brandon, who came highly recommended by a guy at work, someone who had once sued his own brother over a stolen inheritance. Brandon was sharp, methodical, and didn't waste time pretending things weren't what they clearly were. I laid it all out. The charges, the selfie, the pattern of smaller thefts over the years, the messages. I handed him my phone with the most recent text still on the screen. Thanks for the treat, big bro. It didn't take much explaining. After going through it all, he leaned back and said, this isn't just misuse. This is fraud. And if she's done it more than once, we can press harder. I asked him what my options were. He said we could take it to small claims for the exact amount, $3,218.64, but he suggested adding emotional damages and breach of trust. Total ask, $6,000. I said, do it. Felt strange how easy it was. Not morally, just logistically. I always thought that confronting her would be a messy, emotionally charged disaster, but filing the paperwork took 30 minutes. Brandon handled everything. I just signed, gave a short statement, and walked out of his office with a case number and a weird sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. By lunch, the texts started again. Rapid-fire messages. She was no longer pretending it was a misunderstanding. She was panicking. Jacob, seriously, what are you doing? Can we please talk? You're taking it too far. Mom said, you're blowing this up on purpose. This is family stuff, not legal stuff. Then came the voice messages. I didn't listen to them. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what they'd sound like. Forced tears, empty guilt, maybe a promise to pay me back eventually. All versions of the same lie. But around 3 p.m., my phone lit up again. This time it was my mom. I let it ring. Then she called again and again. I finally answered, expecting anger. What I got was worse. Disappointment. She started with, you can't possibly be serious about suing your sister. I stayed quiet. Let her keep going. She didn't mean to hurt you. She made a bad decision. We raised you better than this, Jacob. Not everything needs a courtroom. Sometimes family just needs to talk it out. I asked her why they were never this stern with her. She didn't answer that. Instead, she told me to consider how this would make the family look, that we should keep things in-house, and that I should be the bigger person like I always was. I told her I wasn't bigger anymore. I was done carrying her mistakes. Then I hung up. The following morning, Brandon submitted the claim officially. The court accepted the case later that week. She had 10 days to respond. And right when things finally started to feel stable again, no new charges, no calls, I got a knock on my apartment door. It was her. No warning, no text, just standing there in jeans and a hoodie, clutching her phone like it held the script to a last-minute apology. I didn't say anything. I just opened the door wide enough for her to speak, but not enough to invite her in. She said she needed to talk. Said she'd realized how wrong it was. That she was scared, ashamed, and had started looking for ways to pay me back. She sounded calmer than I expected. She didn't cry. She wasn't defensive. Caught me off guard. She asked if we could go inside and talk. Just 10 minutes. She said she didn't want this to go to court, that she couldn't afford a lawyer, and that she had been looking into payment plans. She even said she was thinking about going to therapy. I don't know what it was. Maybe I wanted to believe her. Maybe I just wanted to feel like she was finally owning up. So I let her in. And for a brief, stupid moment, I thought that maybe something had finally changed. She stood in my kitchen like a guest who knew she'd overstayed her welcome before she even took off her shoes. I didn't ask her to sit, but she did anyway, right at the kitchen table where I usually ate breakfast and read emails. The same table I used when I filled out the paperwork to sue her. She started slow. Said she came to apologize. Said she understood what she did was wrong. She didn't try to blame anyone. No talk about stress. No playing the victim. It was like someone had handed her a script labeled Redemption Arc. She said the trip wasn't meant to hurt me, that she wasn't thinking straight, that she'd had a breakdown and wanted to disappear for a weekend and used the only card she thought would work. She admitted she knew it was wrong. She kept her voice calm. No theatrics. She said she was ashamed. It was almost convincing. She told me she wanted to pay me back. Said she was already looking into payment plans and even pulled out her phone to show me $417 in a savings account. Her way of proving she was serious. She talked about therapy, a new job she'd applied for, how she wanted to get her life back on track. I said I'd think about it, that I needed time. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't trust. But it was the most civil conversation we'd had in years. After she left, I sat there for a while, just staring at the spot where she'd been sitting. Part of me wanted to believe it, that she changed, that maybe losing my trust had finally hit her harder than any lecture or scolding ever did. Then, at 1:42 a.m., my phone buzzed. Declined transaction, $1,500. Merchant, Lucky Bear Casino Online. My stomach dropped. I didn't even have to check the details, but I did anyway. It was from an old credit card, one I rarely used anymore, one that I hadn't frozen because I never gave it to anyone. Except, 2 months ago, she helped me set up my new phone after I dropped the old one. I remembered sitting on the couch while she tapped through iCloud settings. I hadn't thought twice about it. I was still staring at the alert when another message came in, this time from her. No apology, no confusion, just this. That one's for dragging me into court. Consider it a little revenge. I didn't reply. I didn't give her the satisfaction of another fight. I just took a screenshot, called the police, and forwarded everything to Brandon. She was arrested the next day, charged with fraud and unauthorized use of financial information. With the previous court case still pending, the second offense sealed her fate. She got 15 days in county jail. Short but enough. Enough to make it real. The restraining order came next. She was legally barred from coming near me, messaging me, calling me. Only my parents were allowed to speak to her on my behalf, and only if it involved something urgent. That's when the calls started from my mom, from my dad, back-to-back voicemails. I didn't even have to listen to them. I knew the tone, knew the script. You didn't have to do this. She's your sister. You should have protected her, not punished her. She needs help, not a jail cell. They weren't calling to ask if I was okay. They were calling to clean up her mess again. Only this time I wasn't moving an inch. 2 weeks later, I stood in front of a judge. Brandon spoke clearly, calmly, laid out the charges and the evidence. Her history, the screenshots, the fact that she never even tried to deny the second theft. She didn't show up. The judge ruled in my favor. Full repayment, $3,218.64. Additional $2,000 for stress and damages. And that was that. Legally, it was over. But I knew I'd never see the money. Not all of it, anyway. Brandon said the judgment would follow her, impact her credit, show up on background checks. It would haunt her long after I'd moved on. And I was done. She was out of my life completely, but not out of trouble, because just a few weeks later, I found out exactly why all of this had spiraled in the first place. A few weeks after the judgment, I started getting updates from Brandon, mostly procedural stuff. Where the debt had been logged, the next steps in collection, all that. I asked him straight up if I'd ever see a cent. He gave me a polite but honest maybe. I didn't care anymore. It wasn't about the money. It hadn't been for a while. That same week, I got a text from my dad. It was short. "She's going through something. Can we talk?" I didn't answer. He called an hour later. I let it ring. He left a voicemail that started with the usual guilt trip. Family understanding, second chances. But then he said something that caught my attention. "She's in trouble, Jacob. Real trouble." I listened again just to be sure I heard it right. Then I called Brandon and asked him if there had been any recent updates I didn't know about. There hadn't. Whatever trouble she was in, it wasn't legal. 2 days later, I got a text from my cousin Mark. We barely talked, so I knew this wasn't casual. "You hear about Jenna?" That's how I found out the rest. The gambling, the payday loans, the fake job interviews she'd been staging to keep my parents from asking questions. According to Mark, it started months ago, right around the time she was saving for a trip and asked for that weird Venmo transfer from my mom. Money, she said, was for a rental deposit, but had actually gone straight into a crypto casino site. She'd racked up debt with 4 different microloan apps. None of them were traditional lenders. These were sketchy, high-interest platforms that didn't care about your credit score, just that you kept paying daily. And she had been paying at first. She sold her TV, her laptop, borrowed from friends, blamed her bank for freezing her card. At one point, she pawned a bracelet my grandmother had left her. The only thing she'd ever said she'd never part with. It explained everything. Why she took the vacation. Why she tried the second charge even after pretending to be sorry. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving a point. She was drowning. My parents had known for about a month. They didn't tell me because they didn't want to influence the court case, which was laughable considering they'd spent the entire time pressuring me to drop it. They were helping her now financially, trying to clean things up, pay off her debts, get her into therapy. I wasn't surprised. They always did this. Sweep the broken glass under the rug and act like nobody was bleeding. They asked me if I'd be willing to see her just once. Not to forgive, just to talk. I told them no. I told them I didn't want to know anything else. That she was no longer part of my life. And I meant it. That was the last time I spoke to either of them outside of birthdays or holidays, and even those were limited to brief texts. They didn't push after that. They just stopped including me in anything that involved her. Mark kept me updated whether I wanted him to or not. He said she was getting worse. Had stopped showing up to therapy. Was borrowing money again. Started lying to friends and got caught. She was circling the drain, and I wasn't going with her. After the court ruling, everything got quiet, but it wasn't peace. It was that uncomfortable, loaded silence you get before a storm or after a funeral when no one knows what to say. So they say nothing at all. My parents stopped calling. Not completely, but it was obvious. The weekly check-ins dried up. My mom stopped sending those long text paragraphs about her garden or what her book club was reading. My dad didn't call on Sundays like he used to. No one said it, but I knew what was happening. They had chosen their side. I wasn't surprised. I was the strong one, the one who didn't need help, the one who handled things on his own. Jenna. She was always the crisis, and they always protected the crisis. Mark was the only one who still talked to me like nothing had changed. He didn't take sides, but he didn't sugarcoat anything either. He was the one who told me about the loans. How Jenna had racked up debt on 4 or 5 different microloan apps, sometimes borrowing from one to pay off another. She'd taken out loans using fake job info, claimed she was freelancing, told one lender she was working remotely for a startup based in Germany. It was all lies. She'd been gambling, too. Online casinos, underground poker games, even slot machine apps that gave out fake bonus money for watching ads. But that wasn't the worst of it. According to Mark, she'd been lying to our parents about getting help while using their money to keep her accounts alive. She told them she was catching up on rent, but her lease had been canceled a month earlier. That was when she moved in with some guy, a friend of a friend she barely knew. His name was Tyler or Travis or something, and apparently he didn't have a job, a license, or even a working phone. But Jenna called him a calming presence. That was how she described him. Calming. That's what she said about the guy who helped her set up a crypto wallet. My parents were in deep now. My dad took a chunk out of his IRA to pay off one of her larger loans, close to $6,000. My mom started dipping into their emergency fund. They still believed she'd turn it around, that she was just going through a phase. They talked like she was 23 again, not 32. They stopped updating me altogether when it became clear I wasn't jumping back into the mess with them. They made a group chat with just the three of them. I found out because my mom accidentally sent a recipe intended for Jenna to our old family thread, then unsent it a minute later. I didn't respond, not to the message, not to the silence. I was out. Then one afternoon, I came home and found an envelope stuffed halfway into my mailbox. No stamp, no return address, just my name in handwriting I'd recognize even in a dark room. Inside was a single folded piece of paper and a $20 bill. The note said, "I know I can't ask for anything. I'm not even sure why I'm writing. I just keep thinking about how I ruined everything. Not just with you, with Mom and Dad too. They won't say it, but they're scared. I can feel it. I don't know how to fix anything. I wish I could go back. I really hope you're happy. You deserve to be." No name, no apology. Just a note that sounded like someone trying to explain something they didn't understand themselves. I didn't throw it away. I didn't frame it either. I just folded it back up, slid it into the drawer where I keep receipts I might need someday, and left it there. I used the $20 to tip the guy who brought my dry cleaning the next morning. I never told my parents about the letter. I knew they'd spin it into some symbol of hope or growth, but I knew better. That $20 wasn't a peace offering. It was a goodbye she didn't have the courage to say out loud. The next weekend, I went upstate to a cabin I'd booked months earlier, not even thinking I'd end up going alone. It was cold and quiet, the kind of quiet that lets you hear things you didn't know were still inside you. The second night, I sat by the fire and thought about everything. About her. About the years I wasted trying to fix someone who didn't want to be fixed. About the way my parents chose her chaos over my boundaries every single time. And I realized I didn't hate her. I didn't even want revenge anymore. I just wanted distance. And now I had it. That was the real win. A month passed. The cold settled in. The court case was behind me. The texts had stopped. Even Mark had gone quiet. It was strange how normal things felt again. Work was steady. My apartment was clean. And I was finally sleeping through the night without checking my bank accounts every morning. Then, out of nowhere, I got an email. Subject: confirming address for delivery. It was from an online luxury boutique I'd never ordered from, confirming a $1,497.62 purchase for a leather handbag and a pair of designer heels. Shipping to my apartment. I didn't even blink. I called the company immediately, flagged it as fraud, and got the charge reversed within the hour. But the question wasn't how, it was why. My financials were locked down tighter than a vault. I changed passwords, deleted saved info, enabled every kind of two-factor authentication you can think of. Except one account, my old Apple ID. She still had access. It was stupid. I changed the password. Sure. But months ago, I'd added her email when she claimed she couldn't log into her own iCloud and needed mine just to check something. She must have kept the access somehow. Maybe downloaded a backup. Maybe something else. She hadn't just tried to steal from me again. She tried to make it look like I bought her a gift. A thank you. Maybe a twisted form of reconciliation. Or maybe it was just another scam. Maybe she thought if it looked like a friendly purchase, I wouldn't flag it. I reported it again, called Brandon, filed another fraud report, and added it to the existing judgment. I didn't call my parents. I knew what I'd hear. But this time, I did something I hadn't done before. I called the boutique's customer service line and asked if they had a name attached to the order. The rep hesitated, said it wasn't policy. I pushed just enough to sound like someone who knew his rights. Eventually, she said, "The first name listed under the customer notes is Jenna." I hung up, sat in silence for a bit. Then I packed a box. Inside it, I put a copy of the court ruling, a printed copy of the fraud report, and a short letter. "The next time you try to steal from me, it won't be 15 days. It'll be years. This is the last time you get to use my name for anything. And if you ever come near me or this address again, you'll be dealing with more than just police. I mailed it to her last known address. I didn't expect a response, but a week later, I got one. A voicemail. Her voice slurred. Maybe hi, maybe just tired. You ruined everything. I hope it was worth it. Click. No tears, no fake apologies. Just bitterness. The kind that runs deep. The kind that doesn't fade. I didn't save the voicemail. I blocked the number and that was it. That was the last I ever heard from my sister. Mark texted me 2 months later to say she disappeared. Not in the dramatic sense. Just stopped showing up, stopped answering. Left her phone at her boyfriend's place and vanished. No one knew where she was, not even our parents. They only reached out once after that. My mom left a voicemail asking if I'd seen or heard anything. Said they were worried. Said she might be in trouble. I didn't call back. Whatever hole she dug next, it wasn't my job to fill it. And for the first time, I felt nothing about that. Not guilt, not worry, just freedom. It had been nearly 4 months since she disappeared. No calls, no texts. My parents stopped asking. Mark hadn't mentioned her. I started to believe it was over, that she'd either gone underground, started over, or crashed somewhere too far for any of us to reach. Then last week, I got a Facebook message request from an account with no profile photo, no friends, just one message. It said, "You were right about everything. I don't hate you anymore, but I know why you hate me. I'm sorry, Jacob. That's all." I didn't respond. I didn't report the account. I didn't even block it. I just left it there, unread, sitting like a tombstone for everything that came before. And that was enough. Now on to the next story. Story 8. A real son will help us, Dad said. But I refused and he kicked me out. It's easier to live without you, he said. But it won't last long because now I stopped paying sister. And now, a real son will help us, Dad said. But I refused, so he kicked me out. It's easier to live without you, he said. But it didn't last long because I stopped paying my sister. And now, looking back, I should have seen it coming. My father had always thought of himself as a businessman. He wasn't. He was just a guy who got lucky once, made some money, and assumed he had the Midas touch. He didn't. When his last business venture collapsed, so did everything else. He lost every dollar he had, and instead of trying to rebuild, he just gave up. For the last few years, he had done nothing. No work, no plans, no efforts to fix things. He just sat around and blamed the world for his failures. My mother tried to hold it all together, but she always made excuses for him, telling me, he's just going through a rough patch. Or, he just needs time. This rough patch lasted for years, and in the meantime, I became the provider. I was working in IT making good money, but I had no life. I spent all my time at home working. No dating, no friends, no hobbies, just work. And since I was making money and still living at home, I guess my parents thought it was only natural that I'd start paying for everything. At first, it was small things. A grocery bill here, a utility bill there. Then it got bigger, car repairs, property taxes, medical expenses. But by far the biggest expense was my sister's college tuition. Ashley was a nightmare. I don't say that lightly. She wasn't my dad's biological daughter, but he raised her as his own. She was in college now, and since my dad was broke, it fell on me to pay for it. $30,000 a year. A ridiculous amount of money. And she was totally ungrateful. She never once thanked me. She never once acted like I was doing her a favor. For her, it was my duty. She laughed at me all the time, made fun of me for still living at home, called me a loser for never going out, and yet every time tuition was due, she and my father would remind me that it was my responsibility. I took it for a while, mostly because at least my mom was on my side. She was the only one who ever told me she appreciated what I was doing. Then my dad had an idea. A new business. He came to me all excited and told me he needed $22,000 to get started. "I'll pay you back when I make it big," he said. I almost laughed. "No," I said. His face immediately changed. A real son would help his father. I told him he was a grown man and he needed to start acting like one. That's when he lost it. He started yelling. saying I was selfish, ungrateful, and had no respect for him. My mom tried to calm him down, but he wouldn't listen. Fine, I said. Here's $5,000. That's all you're getting. He stared at it as if I had insulted him. What? That's it? I've had enough of you. Get out. You live in my house and still refuse to do what I say. I wasn't even angry. I just looked at him and said, fine, I'm leaving today. As I packed my things, Ashley stood in the hallway with her arms crossed and a grin on her face. I guess you're finally getting what you deserve, she said. I didn't answer. I just walked past her and out the door. But I wasn't done with her yet. I left that night. I packed my belongings into a few bags, booked an apartment online, and drove off without looking back. My mom cried and begged me to reconsider, but I told her it was time. I was done. And for the first time in years, I felt free. No more paying for everyone. No more being treated like an ATM. No more walking on eggshells around my father's mood swings. It was like a weight had been lifted off my chest. The first weeks were peaceful. I focused on work, got my apartment set up, and most importantly, stopped sending money home. That's when the real war began. The first phone call came a month later. My mom, Mike, it's time to pay Ashley's tuition. I was expecting this. I kept my voice calm. I'm not paying it. There was silence, then a nervous laugh. What do you mean? You always pay. Not anymore, I said. I don't live there. I'm not responsible for them. Her voice grew desperate. Mike, you know your dad can't afford this. He kicked me out. I interrupted. Remember? Said it would be easier to live without me. Well, here we are. She tried reasoning with me, then guilt, then outright begging. I didn't budge. And when Ashley found out, she lost it. I started getting text after text. First her usual taunts. Oh, look at you finally growing a backbone. Too bad you're still a pathetic loser. Then came the threats. You'll regret this. You think you can just walk out on your family? And then the real kicker. Dad says he'll do whatever it takes to get the money. You should have helped him. This is on you. I didn't answer. I figured they'd get loans or find another way. Not my problem anymore. I was wrong. 3 days later, my mom called again, her voice shaking. Mike, your dad did something stupid. I felt a pit in my stomach. What did he do? She hesitated. He borrowed money. A lot of money from bad people. I closed my eyes. Of course he did. Apparently, after I cut him off, my dad got desperate. Instead of getting a job like a normal person, he turned to some friends who loaned him a large sum of money. He swore he'd pay them back with his business profits. But there were no profits. There was no business. And now they wanted their money. How much? I asked, already dreading the answer. 40,000, she whispered. I almost dropped my phone. Are you kidding me? She wasn't. And now the people he borrowed from were getting angry. They had already shown up at the house once demanding payment. They weren't exactly the legal type. You've got to help, my mother begged. They're going to hurt him, Mike. Please. I sighed and rubbed my temples. Let me think. I had no intention of bailing him out, but I had a feeling this was far from over. I didn't go to work the next day. I couldn't concentrate. My dad had managed to get himself into something serious, and as much as I wanted to ignore it, I knew it wasn't going away. $40,000, that wasn't the kind of debt you just ignore, especially when it came from the kind of people my dad had borrowed from. And knowing him, he had probably overpromised and underdelivered, thinking he could charm his way out of it. I had no intention of bailing him out, but I had to see how bad things were. So I went back. Walking up to my parents' house felt strange. I had only been gone a month, but it already felt like a different life. The place looked the same, but I wasn't the same person who had left. When I walked in, my dad was sitting in his usual chair, arms crossed, looking smug. I knew you'd come crawling back, he said. Took you long enough. I almost laughed. He really thought I was here to rescue him. Tell me exactly what happened, I said, ignoring him and looking at my mother. She looked exhausted. 3 men came last night. They knocked first, but when your dad didn't answer, they started banging on the door. They were yelling and demanding money. When your dad finally opened it, they said if he didn't get their money soon, there would be consequences. I turned to my dad. So, what's your plan? He scoffed. I just need more time. If you... No. I cut him off. I'm not giving you a dime. You got yourself into this, you get yourself out. He glared at me. You'd let your own father suffer? You mean the one who kicked me out a month ago? The one who told me it would be easier to live without me? Ashley, who had been sitting on the couch scrolling through her phone, finally spoke. God, you're such an ass, Mike. You make all this money and you can't even help your own family. You owe us. I laughed. Owe you? For what? She rolled her eyes. For being family. That was it. That was all she had. Not an ounce of gratitude. Not even an acknowledgement of what I had already done for her. I turned back to my mother. You're the only person I care about here. If you want to leave, I'll help you. But if you stay, you're on your own. She looked torn. Mike, I can't just... Before she could finish, there was a loud, heavy bang on the front door. We all froze. Then another bang and another. A deep voice called out, "Time's up, old man." My dad's face turned pale. For the first time in my life, I saw my father truly afraid. His face lost all color and his hands shook slightly as he stood up. The pounding continued. Open up. We know you're in there. My mother looked at me, panic in her eyes. Ashley sat frozen on the couch, clutching her phone. I exhaled sharply. Are you going to open it? Or should I? My dad shook his head angrily. No, just be quiet. Maybe they'll leave. I almost laughed. Yeah, I'm sure violent loan sharks are the kind that just walk away if you ignore them. The knocking stopped. There was silence for a moment. Then a voice, quiet, too quiet, came through the door. You don't pay us back, we take something else. That's the way it works. So, last chance. Open the door. I went to the window and pulled back the curtain a little. 3 men stood outside. One was short and stocky, covered in tattoos. Another was tall and bald, wearing a leather jacket. But the third man, the one doing the talking, was different, well-dressed, quiet, almost professional. This wasn't some random gang. These were people who knew exactly what they were doing. My dad stood rooted to the spot, shaking his head. My mother whispered, Mike, please do something. I made a decision. I walked to the door, unlocked it, and pulled it open. The 3 men looked at me. The well-dressed one nodded politely. You're not the old man, he said. I leaned against the door frame. No, but I'm the one who actually has a brain. Let's talk. My dad hissed from behind me. Mike, don't. I ignored him. So, my dad owes you 40 grand. Let's be honest. He's not going to pay you back. The well-dressed man tilted his head slightly. That's his problem, not yours. See, that's where you're wrong, I said. I'm making it my problem, so you don't make it my mother's problem. I nodded at her, standing behind me. She has nothing to do with this, and neither does my sister. So whatever happens, they stay out of it. Agreed. The man studied me for a moment. And what exactly are you offering? I had no plan, but I had to think quickly. Give me a week, I said. I'll get you some money. Not all of it, but enough to keep you happy for now. In return, you leave her alone. The man looked at me for a long time. Then he smiled. I like you. He turned to the other 2 men. See? This one actually understands how business works. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a small card, and handed it to me. 1 week, he said. Call me. Then he turned and walked away, the other 2 following. As soon as they were gone, I turned back inside. My dad stormed up to me. What the hell was that? You think you can just do business with criminals? I laughed in his face. Oh, I'm the problem? You borrowed from them, idiot. I just saved your ass. He opened his mouth to argue. But before he could, my mom did something I never expected. She stepped forward, looked him dead in the eye and said, I'm done. Silence. Ashley stared at her. What? Mom's voice was firm. I'm leaving. I should have left years ago. Mike, can I stay with you? I nodded immediately. Of course. She turned to Ashley. You can come with me or stay with him. Your choice. Ashley looked between us. Then she scoffed. I'm staying here. This is his mess, not mine. Mom shook her head sadly. Then she went into the bedroom to pack. For the first time, my father looked truly lost. He turned to me as if he expected me to say something. I just smiled. Enjoy your easier life without me. Then I walked out the door, my mother right behind me. I drove my mom to my apartment in complete silence. She just stared out the window, her hands folded tightly in her lap. I didn't push her to talk. She had just walked out on a marriage that lasted over 20 years. That wasn't easy, no matter how bad things had been. When we got inside, she sat down on the couch and let out a deep sigh. I should have left him a long time ago, she finally said. I nodded. Yeah, you should have. She gave me a tired smile. No, I told you so? I shrugged. You already know. She chuckled, but then her face turned serious. Mike, what are you going to do about those men? I had been thinking about that the entire drive home. I wasn't about to throw 40 grand at my dad's problems, but at the same time, I wasn't going to let these guys come after my mom. I'll figure something out, I said. The next day, I called the number on the card. A smooth voice answered. I was wondering when you'd call. Let's meet, I said. We agreed on a small cafe in a quiet part of town. When I arrived, the well-dressed man was already there, sipping an espresso. He gestured for me to sit. Mike, was it? He said, smiling. I like people who take initiative. I didn't bother with small talk. I'm not paying my dad's debt. He tilted his head, amused. Oh, but, I continued, I have a counter-offer. He leaned forward, intrigued. I'm listening. I took a deep breath. My dad is useless. He's never going to pay you back. But I have something better. A way for you to make your money back in profit. He smirked. And what's that? I pulled out my phone and showed him my company's website. I work in IT, cybersecurity to be specific. I know how to find vulnerabilities in systems, things most companies don't even realize are weaknesses. Information like that, it's valuable. His eyes darkened slightly. You're suggesting something illegal, Mike? I shook my head. I'm suggesting something profitable. I can offer you information, weaknesses in security systems, gaps in firewalls, anything someone like you could use. He watched me for a long time, then he chuckled. You're either very smart or very stupid. Probably both, I admitted. He took another sip of his espresso. And how do I know you won't screw me over? Because I need you to leave my family alone, I said. And because I don't make deals I can't deliver on. He tapped his fingers on the table, considering. Then he nodded. You have 1 week, he said. Impress me. Then he stood up and walked away. I sat there for a long time, staring at my untouched coffee. I had just made a deal with the devil, and now I had 7 days to prove I wasn't bluffing. I spent the next 3 days buried in work, not my usual job. I called in sick for that. No, this was something else entirely. I had just promised a group of very dangerous men valuable cybersecurity intel. That wasn't something I could fake. If I came up empty-handed, they wouldn't just walk away. So I did what I did best. I hacked. I wasn't a criminal, not really. My job in IT meant I knew how to find vulnerabilities, how to test systems for weaknesses. But this time, I wasn't doing it for a company. I was doing it to survive. I started looking at mid-sized businesses, ones that were making money but weren't investing properly in security. I wasn't looking to steal, just to find something, a flaw, a weakness, anything that could be leveraged. By the 5th day, I found it. A small financial firm, not a bank, but a company that processed transactions for private clients. They had a huge security oversight, one that would allow someone to redirect certain payments before they were finalized. I had no interest in actually using it, but they would. The problem was, once I handed this over, there was no going back. I had no control over what they do with it. I was playing with fire, but what choice did I have? On the 7th day, I met with the well-dressed man again. This time, it wasn't at a cafe. He had texted me an address. a sleek, modern bar in the expensive part of town. When I arrived, I was led to a private booth in the back. He was already there, sipping whiskey. "Right on time," he said. "Let's see what you've got." I handed him a USB drive. "Everything you need is on there. Company name, access points, security flaws. It's clean. Nobody will trace it back to me, or you." He twirled the drive between his fingers, inspecting me. "And what exactly do you get out of this?" "You leave my family alone," I said. "No more visits, no more threats. My mom and sister don't exist to you." He smiled. "And your father?" I shrugged. "Do what you want with him." He chuckled coldly. Then he pocketed the drive. "All right, Mike, you held up your end. I'll hold up mine." He stood up, adjusted his suit, and looked down at me. "You're smart. You think ahead. That's rare. If you ever want real money, call me." Then he walked away. That night I didn't sleep. I had done what I had to do. My mom was safe. Ashley too, even if she didn't deserve it. My dad? That was his problem now. I half expected to hear from him, but the next day passed in silence. Then another. Then a week. Finally, my mom got a call. She answered it, listened for a few moments, then looked at me. "It's Ashley," she said. "Your father is gone." I frowned. "Gone?" She nodded, eyes wide. "He disappeared. Just vanished." I took the phone. "Ashley, what do you mean he's gone?" Her voice was shaky. "I don't know. He went out yesterday, said he was handling things, and never came back. His phone is off. His car is still here. He just disappeared." I exhaled slowly. I had a feeling I knew exactly what had happened, and I knew I'd never see him again. I wasn't surprised my dad disappeared. The moment Ashley told me, I knew exactly what happened. He had run out of time. The men he borrowed from weren't the type to let things slide. I had given them what they wanted, valuable intel, but my dad still owed them, and he had nothing to offer. No money, no leverage, no way out. I didn't ask questions, didn't call around, didn't try to find him. For the first time in my life, his problems weren't mine anymore. Ashley, on the other hand, completely fell apart. A week after my dad vanished, she called my mom in a panic. She had never worked a day in her life, never paid a single bill, and now suddenly she had to figure everything out alone. "The house bills are due," she sobbed over the phone. "The utilities, the taxes. I don't know what to do." I was sitting beside my mom when she called. She put Ashley on speaker. "Ask your brother for help," she pleaded. I leaned forward. "I did help, Ashley. For years. You laughed in my face." She sniffled. "But this is different." "Is it?" I asked. "You told me I owed you because we were family. That's funny. Because when I needed family, you laughed while Dad kicked me out." She was silent. "Figure it out," I said. Then I hung up. My mom never went back to that house. She stayed with me, slowly rebuilding her life. She got a part-time job at a local bookstore, something she had always wanted to do. For the first time in years, she looked happy. Ashley stayed in the house for 2 months before reality hit her. With no income and no way to pay the bills, she was forced to sell. She moved into a tiny apartment and got a job, an actual job. I heard through some relatives that she hated every second of it. As for my dad, he never came back. Maybe he ran, maybe he didn't. I didn't ask, didn't care. I just moved on. And for the first time in a long, long time, life was good. Now on to the next story. Story 9. At my engagement party, my sister accidentally dumped wine on my outfit and said, "Now it suits your cheap tastes." My mom covered for her. Everyone laughed. I didn't react. That night, I cut off her utility payments and froze the family card she used weekly. But at 8:40 a.m., they got the real news. Eviction papers were already on the way. I knew something would happen. I just didn't know it would be that blatant. It was my engagement party, our engagement party. Actually, since Emily had planned most of it, she looked like something out of a magazine that day. Graceful, composed, perfect. And I never felt more proud standing beside her, finally introducing her to everyone in my life. Of course, that meant my family, too. They showed up late. My mom was in a new blazer she definitely couldn't afford. My dad was already a drink deep. And my sister, Lindsay, was in something that looked deliberately chosen to draw attention. Too much attention. Lindsay's been jealous of everything I've ever done. When I got into college on a scholarship, she told people I must have cheated on the SAT. When I got promoted, she said it was probably a diversity hire. And when Emily and I announced our engagement, she laughed and asked if we were doing it for a green card. Emily was born and raised in Chicago. Still, I kept helping. I paid for Lindsay's car insurance, her utilities, and the occasional emergency shopping spree. I let her use the family card I set up for groceries when Mom lost her job. Every time they asked, I said yes, mostly for my grandfather's sake. He's the only one who ever really had my back. The party was in full swing. People were toasting. Someone played that acoustic version of "Can't Help Falling in Love" in the background. Emily and I were standing near the center talking to some of my coworkers when Lindsay walked over with a glass of red wine. She smiled, said congratulations, then did the most insane thing I've ever seen. She stumbled exaggeratedly and tossed the entire glass across Emily's white dress and my light gray suit. Gasped. Someone dropped a plate. Emily just stood there, stunned. Then Lindsay said it loudly. "Now it suits your cheap taste." I looked at my mom. She was already walking over saying it was an accident. Poor Lindsay didn't mean it. She just had too much to drink. Then she laughed. A few of my relatives followed, giggling like it was some sitcom moment. Emily looked like she was going to cry. My friends, thank God, looked horrified. But me? I didn't say anything. I handed Emily my jacket, took her hand, and walked her inside the house so she could clean up. We didn't go back out for an hour. Grandpa came in to check on us. He said some people were arguing already and asked if we wanted to cancel the rest of the night. Emily said no. She didn't want to give them the satisfaction. I could see how hard she was trying not to let it ruin her. When we came back out, people clapped. Not sarcastically, just trying to reset the vibe. Grandpa pulled Lindsay aside and said something low and serious. I didn't hear it, but she didn't look so smug after that. The night dragged on. We cut the cake, took pictures, and pretended. But that night, after everyone left, Emily went to bed early. I sat at the kitchen table and opened 3 apps. My bank, my utility provider's dashboard, and a legal services site. By 1 a.m., Lindsay's access to the family card was revoked. Her phone would go dark in 3 days unless she paid the bill. Electricity would be gone by the next billing cycle. And the best part? At 8:40 the next morning, they'd all get something much worse in the mail. Eviction notices from Grandpa's property. But that's only the beginning. The first ping came at 8:42 a.m. It was a blurry photo of a piece of paper sitting on the kitchen table, our old kitchen table. The paper was a formal eviction notice. Across the top in big, bold type, "Notice to vacate." My mom had circled it with a red Sharpie like that was supposed to change something. The texts came pouring in after that. "Nathan, what is this supposed to mean? Is this a joke? You wouldn't seriously do this to your own family." I didn't reply. Not out of cruelty, not even out of anger anymore. I just had no interest in explaining things to people who'd spent years pretending they were above needing to understand me. They knew what this was about. They pushed me too far. I don't know what part of the party they thought I'd forget. Maybe they figured the wine would dry and the humiliation would fade. But it hadn't. I could still hear the laughter, the mocking tone in Lindsay's voice, and the way my mother tried to smother it all with fake concern and half-truths. Emily had cried in the car on the way home, quietly, like she didn't want me to hear it, and I remember sitting there watching the street lights pass over her face, thinking, never again. Later that afternoon, I drove over to Grandpa's. He was already sitting on the back porch with 2 mugs of coffee and a thick folder. He didn't say a word. He just pushed the folder toward me. Inside were rental records, statements, screenshots of unanswered texts, everything. My parents hadn't paid him rent in nearly 11 months. I already knew most of it. They always made excuses. I helped cover 1 or 2 months when things got tight, thinking it would buy them time to get back on their feet. Didn't. It just gave them permission to stay broken. Grandpa told me he was done. He said he'd called his lawyer that morning and had the papers ready. The notice they got, that was no bluff. They had 2 weeks to vacate the house or face formal proceedings. Then he asked if Emily and I wanted to move in. Now, Grandpa doesn't live alone. Camille, his wife, yeah, the one who's 25 years younger, lives with him in that house. She's one of those people who seems too energetic to be real. She teaches Pilates, runs a vegan meal blog, and talks like she's hosting a podcast even in casual conversation. But she adores Grandpa, and somehow it works. I was hesitant, but Emily loved the idea. We hadn't really settled into our apartment yet, and she said something about wanting to be around people who actually seemed happy for us. So we said yes. That night, while Emily packed a suitcase and I loaded her car, the real fallout began. Lindsay's power went out first, then the Wi-Fi, then the water heater. I got screenshots from mutual friends of her Instagram story. Blurry selfies lit by candles with captions like, "Can you believe people will actually sabotage their own blood? Bitter doesn't even cover it." She didn't tag me, but everyone knew. Then Mom called again, then Dad, then Lindsay. I didn't pick up, but I did send one last message to the utility company. Remove my name entirely. No more autopays, no more extensions. The account was theirs now. By Friday night, they were living in a house without hot water, internet, or working outlets in half the rooms. Sunday afternoon, Grandpa sent the final message. A group text to all 3 of them. "You have 2 weeks. I expect the keys returned on time. If you need to figure something out, do it elsewhere. This house is no longer your problem." That night, Lindsay showed up at Grandpa's door with a bottle of wine and an apology that sounded rehearsed before she even opened her mouth. Camille answered, listened for 5 seconds, then closed the door in her face. That was when it hit me. They weren't just being taught a lesson. They were being shown what it felt like to not be protected, to not be bailed out, to be treated like what they were. People who chose pride over peace again and again. And this time, there was no one left to clean up the mess. By the end of the 2nd week, they were unraveling. Lindsay tried to make it seem like she was in control. She posted some cryptic nonsense on Facebook with a sunset photo that read, "Sometimes family isn't blood. Sometimes it's a bunch of snakes wearing suits." A few of her friends replied with the usual garbage, "Preach, girl," and "You're better off without fake people." It didn't matter. She was living off candlelight and bitterness. My mom called again on the Tuesday before the deadline. She didn't yell this time. She sounded tired, almost like someone pretending not to be embarrassed. She said they were just asking for some understanding, whatever that meant. I asked her straight up, "Why should I do anything for people who humiliated me and my fiancé on what should have been one of the best days of our lives?" She didn't answer. That same day, I was walking out of work when I saw my dad standing next to my car. At first, I thought he was some guy waiting on a rideshare. He looked different, smaller somehow. Not physically, just deflated, like the weight of everything finally landed on him all at once. He said they'd been applying to rentals all over the city, but no one was biting. He said landlords wanted references and credit scores and cosigners, none of which they had. Lindsay tried to get an apartment on her own and got laughed out of 2 leasing offices. Then he said something that made me pause. "We never hated you, you know?" It was such a pathetic sentence that I almost laughed. I told him that saying you don't hate someone while living off their help, mocking their fiancé, and publicly humiliating them isn't love. It's entitlement. He didn't argue. He just walked off like he knew he had no hand to play. On Thursday, Grandpa had the locks changed. Lindsay showed up an hour later and tried to get inside. Camille answered the door, didn't say a word, just pointed to the lockbox with their storage unit code inside and shut the door in her face again. By Saturday, they were out. Everything they owned was boxed and stacked in a dusty rental unit on the west side of town. The house that had been their safety net for 15 years was gone. And Emily and I officially moved in. It was weird at first. Camille had labeled everything in the pantry like we were in some kind of Airbnb. Grandpa still used a flip phone and read the paper cover to cover. But there was space, peace, and safety. I hadn't had that around family in years. Emily started sleeping better. She laughed more. She stopped flinching every time someone mentioned weddings or family. We started planning again, actual planning, without the tension of wondering which relative would try to sabotage it next. Then Grandpa called us into the sunroom one morning. He had this big brown envelope sitting on the coffee table. He said he didn't want to wait until he was dead to make things right. He said he talked to Camille, updated the paperwork, and had the deed in hand. The house was ours now, not in the future now. He looked at me, then at Emily, and said, "You two are the only ones who ever gave without expecting. The rest of them, they gave me headaches. This house needs a fresh start." Camille, of course, had already prepped snacks for this like it was a celebration. Emily cried this time from actual relief. Me? I just sat there thinking about every time I'd been told to get over it. Every time they rolled their eyes when I said no to something. Every joke about my clothes, my job, my relationship, my future. And now they were crammed into a 2-bedroom apartment with flickering lights and a leaky faucet. Lindsay was sleeping on a pull-out couch in the living room. And the house they used to brag about, the one they called ours even though it was never theirs, that was mine now. Ours. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could finally breathe. We settled in fast. There was something surreal about waking up in that house knowing no one could take it from us. Emily filled the guest room with wedding boards and fabric swatches. Camille offered to help with planning, which turned into long chats over tea and almond biscotti in the kitchen while Grandpa and I worked on repairing the back porch. A project he'd been putting off for years. It almost felt too perfect. And then came the knock. It was Lindsay again. This time she was holding a binder and dressed like she just left a job interview, except I knew she didn't have one. She said she wanted a civil conversation. And since Grandpa was out running errands, I let her in, partly because I wanted to hear what kind of angle she was playing. Now, she sat down and started flipping through the binder. It was a business plan, apparently, something about a pop-up boutique she wanted to start. She had a budget laid out, some sample branding, even a fake projection chart that made no sense. Then she said it. "I just need a small loan to get it off the ground. I figured you'd understand since you know what it's like to start from nothing." I blinked. I asked her if she remembered the wine, the laugh, the cheap taste comment. She waved it off like it was ancient history. She said people say things when they're jealous or drunk or under stress. That we were family and needed to rise above petty things if we ever wanted to heal. Then she tried guilt. Told me she was living out of suitcases, that her car's transmission was going, that Mom was spiraling, and Dad spent most nights at the bar down the street. I let her talk. Then I told her I'd think about it, but I didn't. Instead, I called the property manager of the apartment complex they'd moved into just to confirm something. I knew a guy who worked there from way back in college. Someone who owed me a favor. Turns out they were already late on their first rent. No cosigner, no plan. And if they didn't pay in full by the end of the month, they'd be out. That gave me an idea, a final piece. The next day, Emily and I drove out there. Not to the apartment, but to a condo building across the street. A clean, modern, gated place with solid security and high prices. We signed a rental agreement for Lindsay, then canceled it 2 days later. Why? Because we let the leasing agent call her first. Told her everything was approved, that her move-in date could be scheduled, that the place was hers, and then we pulled the plug. It wasn't about cruelty. It was about clarity. I wanted her to know what it felt like to think your life was about to turn around, only to lose it in the final second. The message was simple. This is what burning bridges looks like. She found out when she showed up for a tour and was told the application had been withdrawn by the cosigner. I don't know what she looked like when she heard. I didn't need to. What I didn't expect. The fallout didn't stop with her. A week later, I got a call from my uncle, my dad's younger brother. We hadn't spoken in years. He said he heard about what happened and wanted to clear the air. He said he was tired of being looped into the drama. Tired of bailing my parents out. Tired of being guilt-tripped by my mom every time she didn't get her way. Then he told me something that made my stomach twist. Your mom's been telling people you've been stealing from Grandpa. That the house thing was fraud. She's saying you manipulated him while he wasn't of sound mind. Emily overheard the call. She sat down on the couch next to me and just kept shaking her head. I knew this was coming. Not the exact rumor, but the escalation. My mother has always been the type to flip the narrative when control slips. But accusing me of stealing from Grandpa? That was different. That wasn't just petty. That was dangerous. And it meant one thing: they weren't done. They were still playing. But so was I. I knew my family was petty, vindictive even. But I didn't expect them to go this far. When Grandpa heard what Mom and Lindsay were saying, that I had manipulated him, that he wasn't of sound mind, that I'd somehow taken the house, I expected him to be furious. But he just sat at the garage workbench cleaning the blade of an old pocket knife. He didn't even look up when he said, "So, I guess I'm senile now. First I've heard." I offered to handle it, make a public statement if he wanted, post something, even get a lawyer on record if needed. He shook his head and just said, "I'm not playing chess with people who can't even finish a game of checkers." But I knew him. That calm wasn't surrender. It was a sign something big was coming. 2 days later, he sent out a group text inviting everyone to dinner. Called it a reset. Said it was time to finally talk things out and stop pretending we didn't all know where this was heading. Emily was hesitant. I told her not to worry. Grandpa never lit a fire he couldn't contain. That Sunday, the entire family showed up. Lindsay came in with a binder and glossy hair like she was on the verge of a press tour. My mom brought a pie store-bought still in the packaging. My dad looked hungover, sat down without saying anything. Camille had gone all out, of course. Table dressed like it was a holiday. Linen napkins, homemade sourdough, even those pretentious little candles shaped like fruit. Emily and I helped plate everything while Grandpa just sipped black coffee, calm as anything. Then he stood up and pulled out a manila folder from under his seat. Said he wanted to make a few things clear before anyone started fake forgiving anyone. First, he clarified the obvious. He wasn't losing his mind. His doctor, whom he had just seen for his annual checkup, could confirm that. So the rumors that were floating around about him being manipulated were lies. Then he opened the folder. Inside were notarized copies of everything: the property title transfer, the updated estate plan, the financial trust in my name. And then he said it out loud. "Everything I own, the properties, the car, the investments, the inheritance, it's all going to Nathan, and it's staying that way." Silence. Then Mom said, "So we're just cut off." Grandpa looked right at her. "You were never on. You just kept plugging in." Lindsay jumped in with something about betrayal and how families don't discard people. Said she was being punished for a single mistake. I didn't even have to say anything. Grandpa cut her off. "It wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern. You've treated your brother like a wallet for years. Then you humiliated him and his fiancée in front of the people who actually care about them. If you wanted kindness, you should have started by showing it." Then came the final blow. "From this day forward, none of you are welcome here. Not for dinner. Not for Christmas. Not if it's raining and you need a roof. We're not doing this again." Mom stood up, said something about needing a lawyer. Dad just grabbed his coat. Lindsay looked stunned. Not angry, just like she couldn't believe her own manipulation finally had an expiration date. They left. No hugs, no apologies, no pie eaten. That night, Emily and I sat on the porch with Grandpa and Camille. They drank wine, we shared stories. It was quiet in a way I didn't know I'd missed. I thought that was the end. But then 3 days later, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a folded piece of printer paper. No note, just a screenshot. It was a police report. Someone had filed an official allegation claiming elder financial abuse. That Grandpa's asset transfer had been coerced, possibly fraudulent, and uncharacteristic. The complainant's name, Lindsay. She wasn't just bitter. She was trying to take us down. And now it wasn't just family drama. Now it was war. The moment I saw Lindsay's name on that police report, everything clicked. This wasn't just about the house or the party or even the years of resentment and freeloading. It was about control. She had lost it. For the first time in her life, no one was rushing to fix things for her. She wasn't center stage. And now she was going to burn the whole thing down just to feel important again. I took the report straight to Grandpa. He read it in silence, then folded it neatly and dropped it into the fireplace. "Let her dig," he said. "All she's going to hit is rock." And he was right. Camille contacted their family attorney the same day. Within 24 hours, he had already filed a response, complete with Grandpa's clean bill of mental health, timestamped video footage of him signing the property transfer willingly, and a paper trail so airtight it could have survived a court of snakes. But I wasn't satisfied just defending myself. So I made one last move. I took every screenshot, every text where they begged for help, every mocking comment they made about Emily and me, even the party photos where Lindsay was clearly not even tipsy when she tossed the wine. I put it all together in a single email and sent it to our extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins. No dramatic subject line, no all-caps rage, just the truth with receipts. And then I deleted their numbers. 3 days later, the detective assigned to the report contacted Grandpa, spoke with him over the phone, said he sounded sharper than most people half his age, and said the case was being dropped due to a clear lack of merit. No further action. That should have been satisfying, but it wasn't. What got me, what really got me, came a week later. A letter from my mom, handwritten, surprisingly neat. She didn't apologize, not really. She said she wished things hadn't gotten so ugly, that she never expected things to go so far, that she missed the old days. At the bottom, she wrote, "Tell Emily I'm sorry for the dress. I read it once, then I burned it. Because sorry doesn't fix public humiliation. Sorry doesn't fix calling the police on your own father. Sorry doesn't come when you're trying to clean your conscience. It comes before the damage is done." Lindsay ended up moving in with someone she met at her temp job. A bartender, apparently. I heard through the grapevine she's sleeping on a mattress on the floor of a one-bedroom and sharing rent she can barely afford. My parents, they're still in that tiny apartment outside the city. No one's helping them anymore. The money ran out. The pity ran out. And eventually, so did the people. As for us, we're good. Emily and I got married last spring. Small ceremony in the backyard of the house they thought would always be theirs. Camille wore a green dress and cried through the vows. Grandpa gave a toast and ended it with, "To the only two people in this family who actually built something." After that, he handed me the keys to the lake house and said it was mine now, too. He and Camille were moving to Arizona for the winters. "Too cold here for his knees," he said. "Now the house is ours fully. No shadows, no echoes of laughter at our expense." Sometimes people ask if I miss them, if I regret cutting them off. I tell them this: I didn't lose my family. I just finally stopped pretending they were one. It's been 3 months since the dust settled. Funny thing is, I kept waiting for something to go wrong. Some call, some message, some last-ditch drama, but nothing came. Not even a whisper. Emily and I are fully moved in now. The house doesn't feel like Grandpa's anymore. It feels like ours. We painted the kitchen, got rid of the old beige walls in the hallway, and turned the sunroom into a mini library with floor cushions and soft lighting. Emily calls it her thinking spot. The wedding photos finally came back and they're perfect. The kind of photos that actually make you forget all the chaos that came before. There's one of Grandpa holding Camille's hand during the vows. We printed it and framed it for them before they left for Arizona. They've settled into their new place down there. A desert-style home with mountain views and a community pool. Camille sends us videos of Grandpa trying yoga every Sunday. It's mostly him lying flat on a mat, refusing to move, while Camille laughs in the background. And us, we've been happy. Real, simple, quiet happy. Emily's dress business is picking up faster than we expected. She just signed her first out-of-state bridal boutique partnership, and I've been helping her convert the guest room into a work studio. I started going back to the gym, cooking more, working less on weekends. The biggest surprise? We adopted a dog. A rescue, part shepherd, part who knows what. His name's Murphy. He chews through everything except the one toy Emily gave him the first day. Sleeps between us every night like it's his job to keep watch. Sometimes I sit on the back porch with a coffee and Murphy curled up beside me, and I think about how loud life used to be. The shouting, the guilt, the need to keep everyone from falling apart. It's just gone now. No noise, no begging, no pretending. And in that silence, I found something better than revenge. I found peace. Real, earned peace. And I'm not giving it up for anyone. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.